NPR. And from the Wallace Foundation, an independent, nonpartisan research foundation collaborating with grantees and partners in the arts, school leadership, and youth development. More at wallacefoundation.org. This is NPR.
Local issues, national headlines, and your perspectives. Join us for Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Coming up next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham. In heart surgery, expertise matters. Mass General Brigham Heart and Vascular Institute performs thousands of surgeries each year and is committed to research and innovation. massgeneralbrigham.org/heart.
Roadshow heads to Castle Farms in charming northern Michigan in search of finds fit for a king. Guess the top find on a new episode of Antiques Roadshow. Tonight at 8 on GBH2.
When you get ready with GBH's Morning Edition, you start the day informed.
All eyes are on the Supreme Court today.
Ready for all the elements.
We have mostly sunny skies for today, a little breezy as well.
And relaxed, because you're covered on the issues that matter most.
The latest headline news concerning the CDC.
Get ready with us. GBH's Morning Edition with Mark Hers. Weekdays starting at 6 on GBH 89.7. And streaming on the GBH News app. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on BPR and GBH and NEPM. We turned GBH's Studio 3 into a complaint hotline. Mad about the abysmal protest coverage or the Trump administration's God Squad of oil and gas industry experts convening this week to decide which species get to go extinct. Give us a call. We'll try to get all the bad vibes out early this week. Then it's Princeton's Khalil Gibran Muhammad on racism and sexism at the Pentagon, and food policy analyst Corby Kummer on Trump's Iran war impacts on food prices.
I'm Marjorie Egan. In the second hour, it's retired federal judge Nancy Gertner breaking down the landmark trial involving YouTube and Meta and previewing the Supreme Court's hearing on birthright citizenship. Then we'll end the show with the moldiest of BPR chestnuts. Jim insisted, when is it time for elderly drivers to turn in the keys? Americans are keeping our licenses longer than ever. Should there be an age limit to getting behind the wheel? Call or text next on BPR.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump is again threatening to blow up Iran's electricity plants, oil wells, and possibly desalination plants. Those provide water to tens of millions of Iranian civilians. Trump says Iran needs to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to oil tankers. But he also says his team is talking with a new Iranian regime he finds reasonable. However, Trump is still sending U.S. troops to the Mideast. NPR's Greg Myrie says about 50,000 U.S. troops will be there.
This still relatively small numbers. They could carry out specific limited operations, but it's not nearly enough for a major sustained ground invasion. And neither Trump nor the Pentagon has hinted at the mission, but clearly the most urgent issue is the Strait of Hormuz. So there's speculation that the troops may be part of an effort to try to open the strait for oil tankers.
NPR's Greg Myrie reporting. TSA agents have now gone without pay for more than 40 days. That's triggered historic wait times at airport security checkpoints. But as NPR's Joe Hernandez reports, the Trump administration says TSA workers could be paid as early as today.
The Trump administration says it's using funding within the Department of Homeland Security budget to pay TSA workers. That's after Congress failed to reach a deal to fund DHS. Lawmakers have disagreed over calls for tighter restrictions on immigration enforcement. It's unclear exactly how the Trump administration's funding plan for TSA will work. The agency is seeing its longest wait times in history, with some travelers stuck 4 hours or more in airport security lines. Meanwhile, White House border czar Tom Homan told multiple media outlets ICE agents sent to airports could stay there even after TSA officers are paid. Joe Hernandez, NPR News.
The U.S. Supreme Court is set to hear oral arguments on Wednesday that could narrow or end birthright citizenship in the United States. NPR's Janaki Mehta reports on how this could change the lives of students with disabilities.
Medicaid is best known for health insurance, but the program is also among the largest funding sources for K-12 schools, sending billions of dollars each year to help student learning and development. That includes paying for things like occupational therapy and speech therapy for students with disabilities. But to qualify for Medicaid, a student must typically have legal status. If birthright citizenship is narrowed or ended altogether, hundreds of thousands of children each year may no longer qualify for Medicaid. Schools are still required to serve children with disabilities, though, so ending birthright citizenship could shift the financial burden of serving those students to schools, which are already stretched thin. Janaki Mehta, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow's up 400 points. This is NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The MBTA will offer discount rides on the commuter rail this summer as the state preps for several major events. GBH's Diana Dami was at today's announcement.
In a press conference at North Station, Governor Healy announced that starting in June, commuter rail service will be free on Fridays, and that will continue all the way through August. Monthly pass holders will have their cost cut in half over those 3 months, while also allowing monthly pass holders to bring an additional person with them for $1 on weekends. Discounts won't apply to rides to World Cup matches or other special events in Foxborough. Neither will Cape Flyer service from Boston to Cape Cod. MBTA General Manager Philip Ang says they plan to release event passes for World Cup attendees that can be used all day for any commuter rail line. The pricing for these event passes is still being finalized. At North Station, I'm Diana Dame, GBH News.
As Harvard University deals with a rough-and-tumble financial landscape and mounting financial pressure from the Trump administration, the school is attempting to issue $675 million in tax-exempt bonds, its third major debt sale in just over a year. The Harvard Crimson reports that a statement released Friday shows the university reported an operating loss of $113 million last year, its first budget deficit since the pandemic. The statement acknowledges the Trump administration's decision to put the kibosh on billions in research funding, as well as an increased endowment tax projected to cost the university roughly $200 million per year. You're listening to GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Cigna Healthcare. At Cigna Healthcare, they're dedicated to being there through life's everyday and extraordinary health moments. Learn more at Cigna.com/better. This is NPR.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow, we're going to be back at the Boston Public Library with Dr. Ashish Jha. He, of course, was the big presidential COVID advisor. Plus, Sky and Telescope's Kelly Beatty, ahead of the first crewed mission around the moon since the 1970s.
60 years. I know. It's incredible, actually.
Anyway, good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Well, very well, thank you.
So this weekend's No Kings protest offered a very visible platform for discontented Americans to air their grievances. Indeed, millions across the globe took to the streets to make their voices heard in opposition to the Trump administration. You wouldn't know it, though, from a lot of the press coverage. Marjorie is particularly apoplectic about the fact in the Globe, it's below the fold with a little tiny photograph.
Teeny tiny.
So the lines are open this morning for something like a BPR, I guess you could call it complaint hotline, about all sorts of things. April's around the corner, so in the spirit of spring renewal, which we love, we're really going to try not to be grumps and complainers all week long. We're going to try to get it out of our system right now. Give us a call or a text or whatever at 877-301-8970. Let me add a couple to that list. Trump is convening what is being called a God Squad of industry experts to decide which, this is not a joke, which endangered species in the Gulf of Mexico are okay to go extinct.
Whales.
They say it's for national
sea
security.
Turtles.
It is 100% so they can expand oil and gas. There's a whale, right? This rice whale, which I never heard of.
I never did
They're only
either.
50. Then there's Steve Scalise. He's the number 2 or number 3 Republican in the House, saying we have to look for more waste, fraud, and abuse in healthcare so we could funnel all those, quote, savings into the war in Iran. And Congress is leaving for 2 weeks, despite the fact that we are at war. There's a TSA shutdown, etc. So whether your complaints are about our endless war machine or the fact that Iran found not much that embarrassing in Kash Patel's hacked emails, give us a call with your complaint. You'll get it out of your system. We will too. And hopefully we can move on to a relatively complaint-free week ahead. The number's 877-301-897. Can I add one thing right away? The other day, I said to the governor, and wisely she avoided answering the question, should the legislature not take a 5-month vacation in Massachusetts? Maybe they should stick around and do some work, because as we know, one of the least productive, not the least productive legislatures in the country. How about this? The Congress is going home for 2 weeks, even though we're at war. We may have boots on the ground soon. Gas prices are up $1.01. CNN this morning says they could go to $7 if the war continues. Not to mention
Lindsey Graham. Is it down at Disney World?
Oh, he's Disney World. I know. So, and you know, not only is my complaint about the Congress going home for 2 weeks for, I guess, Passover and Easter or whatever they're doing. How about the Democrats showing a brain? How about they all stay in Washington to highlight that the Republicans are home? And why don't they hold hearings without the Republicans?
I think that's a great
to
idea.
highlight all the
Great
problems that they're allegedly concerned about.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, 877-301-8970. You want to add a complaint or two?
No, let me elaborate on my complaint.
Oh, please.
You know, no matter how many, we don't have the numbers in, but maybe 8 million people, the estimate, some 8 or 9 million people, some people said 10 million people across the country. And thousands and thousands. I was at the rally Saturday. You could tell it was much bigger than the one they had before. The sound system, which I've been criticizing.
I was over on Charles Street
times.
behind the stage, and I could hear the sound.
Yeah, the sound
great.
system was really improved. You could hear all the speakers, and that was great. And they added a jumbotron so you could see all the speakers because the common itself was taken over by people. So that was great. But I get my Sunday Globe, and I get the Sunday papers delivered, the Globe and the Times, even though it's very expensive to do that now, and the Times has a big, huge picture above the fold of all the demonstrations across country, plus 3 pictures beneath it. The Globe, it's a good story about the Asian community being exploited by the gambling industry. It's
That's
a good
above
story,
the fold.
But it's not particularly timely while they had all these thousands of people, not only on the Boston Common, but all around Massachusetts. And what do you see? Way below the fold, in a picture that's probably like 3 by 4 inches, they have a little picture of a guy waving an American flag. I couldn't believe it.
Well, before you get too full of praise for the New York Times, by dinner time on Saturday, you know what number on my phone, on the website, you know what number story was the first story about the demonstrations in the Times? And that first story was about whether or not it'll have any effect?
Yeah.
11th.
Yeah.
It was the 11th story in the New York Times.
And if you looked at some of the news programs, which I really don't like on Sunday mornings, but I taped some of them so I could just check in briefly, they downplayed it too. So I don't know what it is about those of us in the media who don't think this is a big deal. That, was it 50 million people? No. Was it everybody in the country? No. But it's significant, and it was probably the only multi-million person gathering in the country, which I think that for some reason the press is loath to...
Well, can I tell you, in all fairness, I don't want to criticize. Well, I will. If you had to choose between, let's say, 10 million people protesting and Donald Trump making up a story about a Sharpie, I would do the Sharpie conversation. By the way, one more.
Tell people the Sharpie thing if
well,
they don't know.
I assume people know.
Well,
during a cabinet meeting the other day, you may know we're at war, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
We're at war. He starts this is an actual length, 4-minute and 56-second rambling thing about how great a Sharpie is, how he negotiated with the Sharpie company. He got them for only $5. They're all black, so it doesn't have the Sharpie symbol, so it's not a commercial. And when either the New York Times, CNN, or the Washington Post, one of the news agencies, called the Sharpie company, what did they say about their negotiation with Trump?
They never talked to him.
It never happened. 877.
Same as the Iranians,
What?
Same
exactly.
as the Iranians.
877-301-8970. 89. So I'm going to add one more to this, and we're going to get to
I'm
your
going to add
calls.
one more, too.
Again, this is a complaint hotline in the hopes that we can get it out of the way by like 11:30. We don't do any more complaining this week. I'm going to play you a beautiful song, Marjorie, and you have to guess why I'm complaining about it. The name of the song is Another Day Old by Eddie Dalton. Beautiful voice. Listen to this.
As good as I used to. Some days it takes me a minute or two.
Now, Eddie Dalton has a couple of songs in the top 5 on the iTunes chart. What are you laughing about?
He's so handsome.
Why is this? He is good
He's
looking.
very sexy.
Why am I complaining about this beautiful song, Another Day Old?
Because he's an AI.
He doesn't exist,
creation.
right? 3 of the top 5 songs on the
great,
iTunes list of hot singles.
He's going to go for several. He's going to win the Grammys. It's going to be a clean sweep this year.
There's some guy in either South Carolina or North Carolina, I can't remember. It's like pumping out these songs, these AI songs that are beautiful.
Let me ask you an uninformed, stupid question.
Please, I wish you
Why
would.
is the person that wrote the songs, or are they just totally computer songs? I mean, I don't understand how this works.
I think it's all I think it's just you feed a demand in an instruction, and they spit out a song.
Yeah.
Eddie Dalton.
Eddie sounded great.
Okay.
Now, let me say one last thing.
Oh, good. Let's keep this
because
going.
I criticize the Catholic Church so constantly.
Oh, Pope Leo.
Congrats to the Pope. As you know, Mr. Hegseth, who did not appear this morning for his
10 days, he has not had one of those macho press conferences.
Over the top, no mercy, death and destruction falling from the sky. He's been talking about Jesus a lot lately. Well, the Pope in his sermon, whatever he does over there on Palm Sunday at the Vatican,
whatever he does,
said that that God does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war. And I could not help think, he talked about, Jesus
that's not
being
a complaint. That's a praise.
Well, yes.
Are you complaining about Hegseth?
Yes,
okay,
that King of Peace rejects violence and comforts the oppressed and all that. So basically, I thought it was a shot across the bow.
I love that expression.
At Hegseth and all these people that are saying they're waging a Christian war over there in Iran.
Okay, so this is your complaint hotline just for a few more minutes. Carrie in Marblehead, you're first. Thanks for the call. We appreciate it. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm calling because I do a lot of advocacy, and I reach out to legislators at a federal and state level and for a bunch of organizations. And one thing I want to empower people to do is to reach out to their legislators. At a federal level in Massachusetts, of course, it's Senator Warren, Senator Markey, Representative Moulton. But across the country, we have to let our legislators know that it's not okay to make a species go extinct.
That is a good argument to make. It is not a good idea in the name of expanding gas and oil exploration to let a species go extinct. Did I say, Carrie, before you continue, the one species they're most concerned about in the Gulf of Mexico is this, did I say this? Yeah, a whale.
And sea turtles.
A Rice's whale, which I've never heard of that either. There are only 50 of them in the world. Keep going, Carrie.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really important. I use what I call my superpower as a voting constituent to change laws in this country. Mm-hmm. I meet with legislators, staffers, and I think everyone should be making a phone call to their DC office and to let them know what they think. And I have to say, the most powerful way to get a hold of your legislators isn't necessarily through a form letter or a petition or an email. It's phone calls. They have to document every single phone call.
Yeah, but as you know, starting August 1st, if you're a state legislator, you're on vacation until the New Year's. So you got to get those calls in soon. Carrie, thanks for the call.
Very much for the call and your determination there. I forgot to mention, we're all talking about how these AI centers, we're not going to regulate AI, of course, that Trump thinks it's fine not to regulate it, but all these AI centers are going to soak up all this electricity, which is going to be an even more intense problem for everybody's electrical bills. Well, at the same time that's going, what did the president do? More than 24 wind farms that are onshore, by the way, across the United States are being delayed as the Trump administration sits on military reviews that were once considered a routine. And this is a big deal because, as I said before, these, as they call them, power-hungry data centers are going to soak up people's electricity. It's a big deal.
Let's go to Bruce in Newton. Welcome, Bruce. It's your complaint hotline to start off today. Hello, welcome.
Good morning. I don't know why everybody isn't asking everybody in the Republican Party what their party has done for the American people. because it seems that they've only taken money away and coverage and essential needs for the American people. And I'm surprised that we're not outraged about that.
Well, we are outraged, Bruce. Bruce,
we're outraged every day. This is sort of outrage central here.
Let me add one thing to your list there. We're at war, and the Republicans who control both the House and the Senate are unwilling to have debates about wars that are killing civilians, killing our own people, not to mention the fact that we now have thousands of men and women over there who may be involved in warfare themselves, and obviously they don't give a damn about it. So I'm with you, Bruce. Thanks for the call.
A texter says, Jim, Complaint Hotline should happily be the name of the show.
Well, actually, we're about to change that tomorrow.
Somebody else said, this is also infuriating. I'm just going to go to Dunkin' and whine.
Can I also play what a total fraud? In addition to be a woman abusing drunk. Here's Hegseth. Remember, he hasn't had a press conference in the morning in 10 days, even though he's marching out there because he can't answer a question. Here he is. Remember when he was like righteously angry the other day about the Strait of Hormuz? Listen to what he said 10 days ago and see if this loser would have the courage to say the same thing today. Here it is.
Or more fake news from CNN. Reports that the Trump administration underestimated the Iran war's impact on the Strait of Hormuz.
No, not at all. Go ahead.
Patently ridiculous. Of course. For decades, Iran has threatened shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. This is always what they do, hold the strait hostage. CNN doesn't think we thought of that.
No.
It's a fundamentally unserious report. The sooner David Ellison takes over that network, the better.
Exactly. And by the way, the reason they thought about it, they had a meeting, Margie, and they said, they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, so gas is going to go up to $7 eventually. I mean, that's not a huge problem. As we're going to discuss with Corby, we can't get any fertilizers. We can't grow anything. The farmers can't do anything. We anticipated that. Not a problem. Fake news.
Yeah, and the more you read, the more you realize they did not anticipate that because they did not think that Iran would react the way it did with attacking its neighbors in the Gulf and with closing the Strait of Hormuz.
They had no idea what they were doing. It's quite clear. 877-301-8970.
This person is very annoyed by the president putting his dirty signature on our money. Have you heard about this? He's going to put the signature on the dollar bills.
First sitting president in the history of the country.
Yeah. And I also mentioned that beneath the $400 million ballroom, they're going to put this new and elaborate bunker. And we can be assured it's all going to have a gold all over the bunker. They already have a bunker. I guess he wants another bunker. They already have a bunker.
They do?
Yeah, don't you remember during the bombs?
Well, they should have a bunker.
Yeah, they should have a bunker. I'm not.
And
opposed
you know what
to
happens when they go in it? He should stay in it. That's what should happen. They should change the lock while he's in the bunker.
He wants a new and improved bunker. Wasn't Cheney in the bunker in 9/11?
I don't remember.
I think so. I could be wrong about that.
Only 3 more years, give or take a few months, and then we move on.
Okay.
Let's go to Coach Andy in Florida. Hey, Coach Andy, what's up?
Hey, I'm Bostonian, but had to take a job in Florida, unfortunately.
Sorry.
Our gas price, thank you. Our gas prices are only $4 down here, which looks like the state by state is being regulated gas-wise. Obviously, this is a Trump state. It's soon to be changing. It's kind of purple, but yeah. So sorry, I hear about the $6 up there.
Well, by the way, it's not $6. It's a little under here, but a guy on CNN this morning.
Is a lot.
Well, it's $8 in parts of LA.
I don't know why.
A gas expert this morning on CNN said that if this continues for weeks more, gas could reach $7. But $4 is a $1.01 increase average over it was the day the war started. Coach Andy,
well, it's only
what?
99. So sorry.
Well, I mean that's not exactly great news, but I guess it's not the worst news. Coach Andy, thanks for the call.
Thank you very much for calling. One of the texters says our show is not long enough for him to air all his complaints about our current situation. I assume that was a man.
You can meet us in the parking lot at the end of the thing because we complain. We stand in the parking lot, by the way, next to our cars. Our cars parked next to each other. And we complain, essentially, for another 15 minutes just to get that out of our system. And then we meet in the parking lot the next morning and continue like there was no break at all.
During the day, we might text with complaints as well because there's never enough complaints around here.
Brenda, go ahead. Where do you want to go?
I was going to get the phone number.
Oh, sorry.
We don't need to get the phone number,
do we?
No,
you don't.
Okay. Brenda in Amherst. Is it Amherst?
Yeah. Hi, Brenda.
It is. Hey there. Thank you so much. This is not a gripe, but this is something that you can do with your griping and putting into action.
Sure.
Something hopeful. So we are winning all the special elections.
True.
And they're having a hard time trying to steal those. So we have one coming up April 7th, Sean Harris, Democrat in Georgia. So we are 1 or 2 seats away in the House from having equal and soon to be majority. The House initiates impeachment. So we can do this before the midterm elections.
Sean Harris is running for Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat, or do I have it wrong, Brenda?
Exactly. Yeah, you got it right. That's perfect. Yeah. Yep. And we also have another special election in August in California. So we can do this. So if folks get on the phone and make calls, easy. There's phone banks. You can get trained. Go on to mobilize. I don't know what it is. Just Google Mobilize, and it's the one-stop shopping for all actions and rallies and events and phone banks. And you can find, basically around the clock phone banks that we can be doing.
You're a healthier, more productive person than Marjorie and I are. Thank you much for your call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is the number. That was not a complaint. That was
very, very
By the way,
helpful.
for people who think they can't do anything, it's an election in Georgia. In addition to what the caller just said, there are phone banks where people, Republicans, Democrats, whoever care about things, get lists of names and phone numbers and call into those states. And so there are plenty of things you can do. Some people actually travel to those states right for an election. 877-301-8970. Complaint hotline with a couple of people have violated the rules with very positive messages.
Do we already speak with Stacy?
No.
Okay, Stacy in Warwick, Rhode Island. Thank you for calling, Stacy.
Your dog hates nail trims.
Woo.
Hi, love you guys.
Thank you.
The complaint about the money, Trump's name on dollars and other bills, I saw on social media that people were suggesting you scribble his name out with a black Sharpie and put it back into circulation.
That is a brilliant idea.
I think it's the United States Treasurer whose name is on there now, right?
Yeah, the Treasurer.
Yeah.
Is it illegal to write on currency? I don't know.
It is not. Yeah. So I hope to see them soon, and I hope they're around for a long, long time.
That is a brilliant suggestion. I love that, Stacy. Thank you. Use a Sharpie and blacken out his name on the money.
Yeah, I that's and the how's the 250-foot Arch of Triumph going?
Arc de Triomphe. Oh, we probably can't use French.
Yeah.
In this country
But
anymore,
it's going to be the Trump Triumph Arc.
I hope so.
250
That'd be nice.
feet high.
That'd be nice. You maybe even see it over the. By the way, about once every 2 weeks, I happen to see one of those scale drawings of the new ballroom thing, and I know I knew this in advance. But if you are not startled every time you see how this ballroom dwarfs the main structure of the White House, it's like an ADU, the accessory dwelling unit the White House is.
And he's talking about how we have the Corinthian columns. Classiest ones. Yeah. Here's a text. My son is serving. They think Hegseth is heinous, and there should never be a discussion of oil prices without first mentioning the human casualties. Let's keep our priorities straight.
We're really glad you wrote. Good luck to your kid. Marjorie and Bourne, hi.
Hi, good morning.
And to you.
I'm almost 60 years old.
Yeah.
And it's the first time in my life that I actually feel hopeless about our country.
It's horrible to hear.
Yeah, it's depressing, isn't it? I mean, it's just bizarre. You feel like your government's out to get you.
Marjorie, you're a perfect person to say, repeat what I said a minute ago. Would you feel better if the Democrats stayed in Washington during this 2-week recess and did something constructive and had hearings about things you care about? Would that lift your spirits at all?
Without a doubt. But what's got me so worried is I had an opportunity as a young person to get a good job, buy a house, get a car, have a family. I am so worried about the young people and what's happening. They're priced out of everything.
Well, I think that's a totally legit concern. Marjorie, you're a good one. Thank you for the call.
It is a legit concern, and I think if the Democrats are going to get back in the favor of people in this country, they got to stop talking and start acting.
Well, there's only so much. Well, you don't mean act legislative. I mean, there's only so much they can do. They have minorities.
Right.
Hold hearings.
Right.
Call witnesses.
We need to. I'm afraid it's going to be another Trump is terrible, 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 and that's not going to be enough. We need to. We talk about housing all around here in Massachusetts. A terrible crisis. We're talking to the governor. Have we eased the crisis yet?
Yeah, some, not enough. As she said to you the other day, there needs to be more done. But they should. Bottom line is they should be meeting and speaking to the American people, not just hoping they win in November because there's such antipathy directed towards Trump himself.
Well, thank you very much for all your calls and all your great texts. We're taking
not nearly enough complaints from me, by the way.
I know. Well, we complain a lot, so we kind of even it out.
Let's keep complaining a little bit. Just a couple more minutes.
Coming up after a quick break, we're going to speak with Princeton's Khalil Gibran Mohammed. We can complain during this segment, too. We're going to talk about more Trump attacks on Harvard, also on medical schools around the country, and some facts versus fiction on the alleged discrimination against hiring white men like Jim. This is BPR 89.7 GBH.
Every morning, you trust your alarm to wake you up. A cup of coffee to get things going. And a GPS to get you there on time.
Your route may be affected by...
For the news you need, trust GBH News.
Welcome to GBH's Morning Edition. Looking at local headlines this morning.
Get ready with us. GBH's Morning Edition with Mark Hers. Weekdays from 6 to 10 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Safety Insurance, offering a variety of home insurance products to cover your home's increased value. You can ask an independent agent about Safety Insurance. Safety Insurance will help you manage life's storms.
And Schneider Electric, providing energy technology and sustainability advisory services to help the Boston Athletic Association shape more sustainable events for athletes, fans, and the community. Learn more at se.com.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Join us tomorrow at the library where they're live. Dr. Ashish Jha, who is the COVID point person for Joe Biden. He was also head of the School of Public Health at Brown. Plus, Sky and Telescope's Kelly Beatty, ahead of the first crewed mission around the moon for 60-plus years. Joined now on Zoom by Khalil Gibran Mohammed, professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at the African American Studies Department and Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. Redirects this is the longest thing I've ever had in my whole life. The Institutional Anti-Racism and Accountability Project. He's also a non-resident, I'm almost done, senior fellow at the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation at Harvard. Now we have about 30 seconds left. Good to see you. How are you? Welcome.
I'm doing great. Thank you. My entire career is illegal right now. So there you have it.
No, that's true.
That is totally true. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you can come out of the bunker to talk to us, So we were just doing this whole segment about complaints for, everything we're complaining about with our listeners. And this was top of some people's, mine and Jim maybe, complaint list. Pete Hegseth, our favorite Secretary of Defense, and these people, these two black women and two black guys that were standing.
Two women. I'm not sure the women are black. Two women.
I thought there were two black women.
They may be. Okay.
Okay, maybe there were two women. Okay, I'm sorry. I could be wrong about that. We'll double check that. But anyway, they were supposed to be highly regarded in the military, and they're supposed to be raised to the level of one-star generals. And what happened?
Well, what happened is Hegseth removed them from the list. And this is a consistent pattern with Hegseth. As we know, he summarily fired without cause several high-ranking women and black officers in the military. He has very proudly boasted that the dumbest thing that the military has ever said in its history is that, quote unquote, diversity is our strength. So Hegseth is consistent here. He's not backed off, and he continues to purge people who, by identity, perceived to be unqualified and undeserving of their participation in leadership in the military.
Yeah, I also read in one or more of the stories about these 4 people who he is denying promotion to, and apparently it's raising some concern. Should raise more within military ranks. There's this person I hadn't heard of, Major General Antoinette Grant. You ever heard of her? She is now the head of the military district in D.C., and the New York Times reports on a conversation that, of course, the Hegseth people deny, that Hegseth's chief of staff went to the Secretary of the Army and said, we can't have Major General Grant promoted to lead the military district of D.C. because Donald Trump does not want to be at events where he has to stand next to a black woman general. And, and while they denied it, does that, is there any part of that that sounds not credible to you? I'm serious.
Well, listen, the entire attack on DEI is largely an attack on leadership. Mm-hmm. It is not an attack definitionally on the mere presence of Black people in positions of work. And I'm going to give you the most surprising evidence for this. We know, for example, that the administration has gone after a number of institutions that over the years have been the focus of increasing diversity amongst the student population, increasing student services to ensure that previously excluded or marginalized populations feel at home in universities. These are often called minority serving institutions, meaning that they have a plurality of non-white students. The Trump administration removed hundreds of millions of dollars from these organizations, but at the same time, and with the other hand, gave about the same amount of money to HBCUs. And here is why that makes sense. It makes sense because the Trump administration is a pro-segregationist party. And segregation had been the dominant political and policy framework for the United States for the vast majority of its history, first in slavery and then 100 years afterwards. We've only lived in a post-segregation world for about 60 years, of which this administration has made a key point to dismantle because the integration era was an anti-white era. So, of course, it makes sense that when you integrate leadership, you have the most visible, highly representational example of advancement towards integration. And that is what this administration and the MAGA movement is trying to dismantle.
We've talked to you before about how long it's going to take to, who knows where we're going to be in 2 years and 10 months, but assuming we all survive a full Trump term, how long it takes to undo some of the pain that he has caused and the reversals, whether it's in civil rights or healthcare, environmental work, etc. I said during this last segment that one of the things is one of my complaints in the first segment was Congress goes home for 2 weeks when we're at war, not to mention every other thing that's going on that needs their attention. Wouldn't it have been useful for the House Democrats to have stuck around, not only to highlight the disappearance of the Republicans, but maybe have hearings on some of these issues, like the things we're just talking about? Isn't public education part of the way you reverse the worst of this more quickly than would otherwise happen, or is that naive?
No, I think you're right, Jim. Listen, party elites on the Democratic side have continued to underperform during the first 18 months of this administration. The problem is that isn't new. Under the Biden administration, Democratic members of Congress also underperformed in sounding the alarm to the American public that the MAGA movement and Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation were putting in place an infrastructure, including amongst red states, to support authoritarianism. And so whether Trump won or not, we should have been at DEFCON 1 with regards to much of the country and an infrastructure that was bending towards fascism. And yet mostly they were focused on first midterms and then the presidential race. They just simply refused to speak about the unspeakable, except when it is politically important for winning elections.
Well, speaking of that, let me extend my question to you one more way, and then we'll continue. So,
are you implying I didn't answer it?
No,
Jim?
you answered it in a beautiful fashion so well that it leads me to a follow-up question. So the Democrats win the midterms. Hakeem Jeffries is likely the Speaker of the House. He calls you and says, now that we're the majority in the House, we can call hearings on anything we want. What are the most important issues you'd tell them to take a look at come January of 2027, should that, in the area about which we're speaking, in January of 2027? What would you focus on right away?
Well, I think that everything that flows from the administration has been an attack on constitutional order. And so there would have to be a series of hearings to determine and to define what exactly the law is with respect to how the nation governs itself, and to hold the Republican Party itself, particularly other members of Congress, accountable for their long list of acceptances of the breach of the separation of government and the consolidation of executive authority in the White House. I mean, we have already gone over the cliff with respect to one party accepting that there's no role for Congress, that there's no accountability for a president, that laws can be broken willy-nilly, that courts have limited power because they are slow-moving and constrained by now a new judicial order that says that one district court's ruling can't apply nationally, which means that the Trump administration can just run around. We have to take a full accounting of this because everything flows from precisely the precedents that have been established by this administration.
When you mentioned Project 2025, I remember it being mentioned during the campaign, and people, including us, really not detailing it very well to people, and Trump saying he had nothing to know about it, nothing to do with it. And it was totally underplayed, I think, right after the campaign. And I think those of us in the media have some blame for that.
So do you think the Democrats are doing their version? They rhetorically have said they are. Think they're doing it, preparing for
No.
Yeah, I would bet it's half-assed, too.
But, I just want to throw in, because I read this story about white supremacy in the White House, and it talked about how nearly 40% of white adults in America believe diversity, equity, inclusion has hurt them. And then you look at these numbers, just a couple of the numbers here. I don't want to bore everybody, but black unemployment, nearly double the rate of white unemployment. Only 1 in 3 black families have retirement accounts compared to 60% of white people. 3 Fortune 500 companies were led by a black CEO. That was in 2021. There's only been 2 black women CEOs ever. And somebody threw in, supposedly a joke, there are more CEOs named John than there are female CEOs. So the numbers just don't back up this idea that it's happening.
You mean about how screwed white people allegedly are?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. That piece, I just want to shout out my colleague Kienga Yamada-Taylor, who is the chair of African American Studies at Princeton, wrote in a journal, Hammer and Hope.
It's a great piece.
She also points out that in terms of median black household income in 2024, it was $30,000 less than median white household income. So facts haven't mattered, of course, in this attack on the anti-discrimination law, civil rights law, on DEI. It hasn't mattered in the public health crisis with regard to vaccinations. It doesn't matter in climate science with respect to the existential threats of climate change. It doesn't matter when Trump goes before press conferences to describe attacks on the U.S., which are not obvious to any of us watching what's happened over the last several months. So facts don't matter. This is an anti-truth authoritarian regime. And unfortunately, we have too many members of our electorate who are either consciously willing to go along with this propaganda and lies or believe it.
Yeah.
So how does that, we've talked to a lot of people in the science community, including Anthony Fauci, about how you counter the anti-science movement. How do you counter the anti-fact movement, even when Trump disappears, assuming he does at some point? I mean, how do you get half the population that is fact-averse to embrace him again?
Yeah, I mean, I studied Rwanda, for example, in its post-genocide recovery, which has been going on now for 30 years. And one of the ways that Rwanda was able to stitch the country back together again, I mean, just to remind people, in 1998, nearly 1 million people identified as Tutsi were killed in a very short period of time, just an unbelievable tragedy of human proportions. But the current president, who has his own authoritarian tendencies, I mean, he might be described as a quote unquote good dictator in this respect, has created a kind of period of national unity by ensuring that people have what they need to live dignified lives as best as possible. Rwanda is the densest, poorest country in Africa, but it has an efficiency rate of domestic spending that rivals the West in every conceivable manner.
What does efficiency rate mean? What does that mean?
Meaning that for every dollar that comes into the country in terms of revenue, about 95% stays in the country and addresses infrastructure and the needs of its public. They have a version of universal health care. So there is something to be said with respect to the affordability crisis, to the economic grievance and populist movement on the right and left with regard to the country we live in. So a future that restores truth is also a future that restores dignity to working people in this country. That's one of the great ironies of Trump's appeal. He's a billionaire, corrupt authoritarian who's selling to low-income working people a vision of their own greatness while he battens his pockets along with others. So, I mean, I can't quite figure out how to get around that, the appeal, but nevertheless, we know that people are going to have to feel a greater economic mobility and participation in this society.
Well, as your colleague points out in that piece that you mentioned, what is it called? The Hammer and, what is it called?
Hammer and Hope.
Thank you. Hammer and Hope. This DEI obsession and all the black guys and the women and the Latinos are getting hired and I'm not, gives an excuse to people that are white and struggling. I mean, and some of those people might be in his base.
Yeah. I mean, the tragedy here is it is the oldest divide and conquer strategy in human history, just playing out in this moment in the most obvious and explicit ways. The issue of dividing people with shared economic interests, with shared realities, was foundational to this country's birth. The slavery itself was used as a wedge to keep indentures, who were landless white people, from joining ranks with enslaved Africans to better their collective economic future in this country, to make a claim for their full participation in democracy hundreds of years before 1776. And yet it's worked, and it's been consistently effective. And fascism thrives on racial hierarchy and divide and conquer. And so we really do have a public education problem with respect to how we address this in the long term, which is to say why higher education is so front and center in the attacks by this administration. Because if anything, in the George Floyd moment, we saw the potential for a critical mass of people to change the way they think about America and its role in the world and the obligations it owes the most vulnerable.
Well, I mean, we never talk about it at Martin Luther King's birthday either, the idea of poor whites, poor blacks, poor everybody getting together. I mean, that was one of his big things, too, like whatever that was 60 years ago. That's somehow swept aside, I think.
Well, it's swept aside in part because what made the post-George Floyd moment critical, it wasn't about a kind of kumbaya beloved community. It was about rewiring the economic infrastructure of the country. It was about doing the hard things, quote unquote, equity-centered, that would address longstanding disparities and inequalities, the kinds of inequalities that persist, as my colleague pointed out in the piece that we quoted from. For example, over 300,000 Black women have been targeted by this administration in one capacity or another, either by the private sector and losing their jobs or by public sector during the DOGE campaign, which is to say, ultimately, that they are paying a disproportionate price for the claims of efficiency.
Boy, we just got started.
Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about Harvard.
No, we didn't. And very few of those black women voted for Donald Trump either. What was it, like 5% of black women voted for Trump or something like that? Yeah.
A very small percentage.
Yeah, very small percentage.
Good to see you, as always.
Thank you very much.
Continue. Be well.
Okay, bye, everyone.
We've been speaking with Khalil Gibran Mohammed, Professor of African American Studies, Public Affairs in the African American Studies Department at Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. After this quick break, Corby Kummer on the food costs associated with Iran and seafood that tastes like meat. Wow.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, retired FBI agent Geoffrey Kelley. He spent 22 years chasing leads, following informants, and digging into Boston's criminal underworld, all to solve a case that remains unsolved, the Gardner Museum heist. In his new book, 13 Perfect Fugitives, he looks back on leading that investigation, the missing art at its center, the close calls, and the toll of spending decades inside one of Boston's most famous mysteries. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Landvest Christie's International Real Estate, an independent brokerage representing residential and investment properties for buyers and sellers across New England and the Adirondacks since 1968. More at landvest.com. And Newbury Court, serving Concord, Massachusetts for 30 years as a not-for-profit continuing care retirement community dedicated to older adults. More at newburycourt.org.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow live at the library with former COVID point person for Joe Biden, Dr. Ashish Jha. Sky and Telescope's Kelly Beatty is going to join us to talk about the first crewed mission to go around the moon in 60-some years, which I did not realize it was so long. We'll talk about why they're doing it. We're joined on Zoom by Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hey, Corby.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie.
Hey, Corby. Thank you so much for joining us. So we all know about gas prices getting higher. I did not know that the Iran war was going to impact food prices as much as some of these stories are predicting. What do you think?
I think you should think a little more about fuel and prices, which I didn't either, frankly. Kim Severson has a piece in the Times about raspberry prices as the focus of the first harbinger. Why raspberries? Because it takes so much fuel to get them from the field to the store, and they're so perishable that it has to be a constant turnover. It makes me very glad I went to a market and got raspberries on sale today, which is what the advice at the end of her piece is. But what it is an examination of fuel. When oil and fuel prices go up, you can be sure that everything is going to go up in lockstep with them. But the first canary in the coal mine are raspberries and berries because they're so fresh, so perishable, need such frequent turnover.
Well, and we also learned that it's not, well, we're focused on things like gas and oil. Fertilizer apparently is imported to a great degree and is deeply affected. So it's not only the food price at the end of the chain, but it's the farmer who obviously is going to suffer as well.
Fertilizer is such a good story because apparently more than half of the world's shipments go through the Straits of Hormuz. They're blocked. It's about to be planting season. That means either farmers will plant less or they're going to have lower yields. Either way, it's going to be more expensive and there will be less produce come fall and harvest season. Fertilizer is a much huger story than I realized, and I didn't realize so much went through the Middle East.
You know, one last thing, since you mentioned the raspberry story, I happen to have brought in raspberries this morning.
I know, they're delicious.
We're splitting.
They don't last long in the fridge.
They don't. They don't last long anywhere,
yeah,
actually.
You got to eat them fast.
So let's assume, for argument's sake, this is based on your history in food pricing world. Let's assume raspberries were, I don't know, $3 a little container right before the war. And let's assume they go up to $6 now. I think $8 in the story we read as an average.
Here's one of Jim's raspberries right here. Isn't it attractive?
Hold that up. Very nice, Marjorie. That's excellent. So, again, $3 before the war, $6 now. I'm making up the numbers, but here's my point. Are they likely to ever go back down to $3, or will the people who produce them say they're so high, if we lower them to $4, people are going to feel some relief, and then we get that extra dollar via price gouging? Is that going to happen, or am I being too cynical?
I don't think with produce there's the same so-called price stickiness, which was a concept I should have known about but didn't, which is that once prices go up because of or labor, as they did during COVID, this was for big consumer packaged goods, big food companies. They don't tend to lower the prices again. So cereal boxes and big packaged food items that went up generally don't come down again. I think that produce is less sticky and that there is more variability in produce and eggs, for example. But another important raspberry related story and fertilizer is so much of the labor that picks any of and all of this produce in the U.S. is foreign born, and there's so much less of it now. Prices have already been coming up since last year because of the labor crackdowns. That's only going to continue, and it will raise prices.
You know,
Now,
Corby, I almost missed. Can I tell him what happened?
Are you going to claim about that you're
I'm
going to
tell
foraging?
him. No, that I almost came late to the show today because I called Marjorie at first thing, and I said I usually forage on Monday mornings. And I got so into it that I almost forgot we had a show at 11 o'clock.
That's right.
Luckily, I got here. Are you a
Jim
forager?
went into the woods. Jim went into the woods for and got pounds of mushrooms and wild rice.
I did.
And apparently he shot some. What's venison from? Deer.
Deer.
Shot a few deer, and then he
I caught
arrived
a
at the
salmon
studio.
in my bare hands. Actually, took it home, skinned it, beheaded it, ate it for breakfast.
So I'm not sure this is the solution.
This is the most ridiculous story I've ever read in my life. Some guy is spending 60 to 80 hours a week foraging in the hopes that 100% of his food, or her food, I forget, can come from foraging because of the food. We know that he calls them the food oppressors. We know that the big food are oppressed. We know that. But, I mean, you have a look on your face. I hope people are watching on YouTube. What's your what's your reaction to the foraging community, for lack of a better expression there, Corby?
It is multifactorial, as my father, who didn't usually like 50-cent words, would say. In this case, we should have a much stronger idea of where our food comes from and what it takes to harvest.
Sure.
This guy, the Guardian was writing about, has taken it to an extreme, and he's trying to put up and harvest all of his food in advance, and it's really hard because protein, meat, getting those needs met, along with the mushrooms and the ramps and the things you can harvest from the road with lots of fuel emissions and sprays and exhaust that we get. It's all easy to ridicule, but
it is.
Everybody should have an idea of what it takes to grow and harvest food, even if they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
My idea of foraging is going to markets and looking for sales.
Yeah, first of all, I forage at Market Basket every weekend. So
Or at Whole Foods.
No, I'm not done yet.
Fingers in the hot bar, Jim.
Well,
one
whatever.
of the texters is saying.
Let me just get back to,
not foraging.
A focused
robbing
forage.
from the hot bar.
I've mentioned this. One of my favorite people, Tracy Chang from Pagu.
Does she forage?
No, yeah. The one thing she forages, she and her kids or her husband or whatever go out once a year or something and forage ramps, which you just mentioned. I never even heard of them until
ramps.
she told me about
What
it.
are ramps?
And she makes ramp pesto. It's some sort of green kind of thing.
Really?
So if
it's like turbocharged garlic. They look like leeks. They grow wild, and they're vile if you hate garlic.
Okay, so what you do is
you don't like garlic?
No, he said if you don't like garlic.
He doesn't like garlic.
You don't like garlic?
Wow.
Okay, we can't derail this on my dislike of garlic.
In any
That
case,
eliminates a lot of foods, right?
A limited forage for one item is a wonderful supplement to your deal.
You let me know when you're going to the woods.
Well, not soon. Okay, we're talking to Corby Kummer. Now, Corby, I was stunned. We read this piece. The average American eats 19 pounds of seafood a year. I would probably say I eat 19 pounds of seafood every 2 weeks. I do. I'm a huge seafood person. 45 pounds is the average annual in the world. It's like almost a pound a week. 90 pounds a week in Europe. And the seafood industry has decided the way to fix this is not to do an education campaign about the health value and all that sort of thing, but to make seafood not only look more like meat, but taste more like meat. They're trumpeting fish spare ribs, for example. What do you think of this campaign?
I think we all have to decide how we're going to take advantage of the new dietary guidelines, which so focus on meat, the Maha love of protein, which Americans get plenty of. In fact, they might get too much protein, but that's not the message we're getting from the current Secretary of Health. And so the fish industry has gotten the memo. And at the annual seafood marketing show, the Seafood Expo, is right in Boston. Yeah. And it happens every year. And this was a Globe reporter who went. And you always are trying to figure out trends. And this year it was gunk things up with breadcrumbs and fry them and deep fry them. But I really liked the idea of the fish spare rib story because it is taking advantage of an unusually textured fish. You know, some people don't like that monkfish is rubbery.
Yeah.
Other people say it's like lobster, it's like meat. It can be a meat surrogate. I think anything that will get people to eat more seafood, I myself would say go to Boston Public Market and Red's Best, which has very fair operating practices with local fisher people. In the Cape, and it's right there, and it often has unusual fish. That's what Jim and I would elect because we really like fish that looks and tastes like fish. But if the American public doesn't, I say go. It's going to increase the market for fish.
Can I tell you though, my secret? Marjorie's not a big fish person.
No, but tuna counts
Well, I
as
was
fish.
just going to say,
tuna in a can.
when I
right?
have
a lot of mayonnaise.
yeah, that tuna in a can is like a 4-year-old.
But
thing,
it's fish.
Marjorie. I mean, come on.
Isn't it, Corby? It's fish.
It's fish.
It's fish.
I remember my can of sardines a day for lunch.
right.
Yes, we did.
Do
Do you eat swordfish? I can't remember.
I do.
Okay, and the reason I bring that up is because the way you start somebody like you who's fish
it's
averse
whitefish.
is you do something
Doesn't
that is
smell.
least fishy, least fish
Yeah.
smelly, and then that's their entry point, and they realize how great it is and how much healthier it is than meat kind of thing.
What about filet of fish sandwiches? What about fish sticks, Marjorie? Where are you on that?
Do you like fish sticks?
I don't like fish sticks. I was a bad mother, and I sometimes gave them to my children when they were little. But no, I'm not a fish person. I don't like the smelly stuff. But swordfish is fine. Sole is fine. Shrimp doesn't smell bad. Salmon.
You love shrimp.
Salmon,
actually.
I just can't.
Can I tell you? When I was a kid, there were fish sticks would come 12 in a package.
Yeah.
That's a lot. My mother would make 2 packages for me. I'd have 2
Little
packages
Jimmy,
of fish sticks,
shoving it in,
and like a vat of ketchup, and that was my entree.
Tartar sauce, and this was a school lunch because of fish on Fridays.
That's right.
Oh, that's right.
That's
of
right.
course.
That's right. That's when Catholics still use it.
So did you eat when you were a little Catholic girl?
And we had to have fish on Fridays.
What, did you eat it?
I think I had ravioli, but that has meat in it, doesn't it?
Well, no, it doesn't have
remember.
to. It could be cheese
I don't
ravioli.
remember. Or I had a tuna fish sandwich. I probably had a tuna fish sandwich.
Fine. We're talking to Corby Kummer. It's gotten a little off topic.
So
here.
RFK Jr. is running into a lot of. I mean, his food stuff. I'm a fan of because he is right about a lot of terrible things in the food. He's trying to get rid of the generally recognized as safe designation.
Explain what that is. I never even heard of it.
Yeah, it sounds a little loosey goosey to me.
I love that we're finally understanding the grass loophole. What is the grass loophole? In the late 50s, the Food and Drug Administration said to big food manufacturers, look, we're all going to assume that flour, sugar, oil are generally recognized as safe ingredients. You don't have to come to us, the FDA, to get approval of these extremely common ingredients. In fact, we'll take your word for it that you've done safety checks and that you can attest for the safety. If we come and we ask you, you'll give us the studies. But as processed foods and different kinds of ingredients to make things ultra palatable, that's the evil explanation. Hypercaloric, you eat much too much, you don't even recognize you're eating because of all these evil weapons in the arsenal of food manufacturers, which is true, but it was also food preservatives. In any case, we have what's called the grass loophole, which is companies can do whatever the hell they want because they can just self-attest that it's safe, whereas European companies can't. And there's 200 ingredients that U.S. manufacturers are allowed to use that have never really been approved or reviewed by the FDA that Europeans forbid. And, my students at the Tufts Friedman School for many of nutrition have for a long time been trying to close this, and students say, look, if it's not good enough for the European Union, it shouldn't be good enough for us. RFK Jr. has been saying, I'm closing the grass loophole. On a recent podcast, he said, I've closed it. He's done nothing of the kind. The FDA hasn't even formulated a rule up for review that would again require companies to apply to them and provide all of their safety documentation for everything they're using. Predictably, the industry is extremely furious about this because it's dozens and hundreds of ingredients and they don't want to spend the money to go through this or to wait. And frankly, so many people have been fired from the FDA because of government, closing down of staff. There would be no staff to review these applications. It would be a huge logjam, but that's the grass loophole.
So let me understand this. I can't believe I've never heard of this before.
Me neither.
So a company can, on its own, unilaterally decide that something is generally recognized as safe and as a result escape FDA oversight?
Well, since 1958, in theory, the FDA could demand safety studies and could say to them, look, we've seen this, we're getting complaints, what really is this? But they don't, and they don't have time to do it, and it's never been a priority of theirs to say, let's do a little cross-check. What does the European Union prevent?
Incredible.
And should we be looking at which manufacturers in the U.S. are using those ingredients merrily unconcerned, whereas the European Union has doubts about it, and they require proof of safety before they'll allow them to be marketed.
When you think about it, the governments in Europe are doing something for the health of their people. Over here, it's like, screw the health of the people. Just let them eat all this horrible food that's full of preservatives and let them have weight problems. And then tell them they can't get help for the weight problems because the weight problem drugs are too expensive. It really is nasty when you think about how the government just says to hell with the health of Americans, not to mention the health insurance.
You're halfway on the way to being a Maha Mom, because they certainly feel that. But now you have to have a whole agenda for what you want the government to be funding, like more staff at FDA to do this review, regulation with teeth against bad things in ultra-processed food, money for the studies from the National Institutes of Health that will say what it is in ultra-processed food that's actually bad, because it's now a guessing game. And the current administration threw out the research that was going to get the answer to that problem. So go right ahead. Keep that up, Marjorie.
I am.
I have a follow-up I cared about, but I have a foraging appointment at 12:15. So unfortunately, I have to cut this short. Corby, we'll continue next time. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Want to go foraging with
Corby.
me this afternoon after the show?
I think I'll take a pass.
Why?
On that. I just don't think it's in my. I'm just going to go
to the supermarket.
I'm going to go to the supermarket. That's right. Okay, we've been speaking with Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, Senior Editor at The Atlantic, Senior Lecturer at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Coming up, we're going to talk with, we're leaving NEPM now, but thank you so much for tuning in. And after the break, Nancy Gertner will be here on All Legal Matters, Supreme Court, Trump administration. Be right back.
If your spring cleaning this year includes parting ways with an old car or truck you no longer want, consider donating it to GBH. You may earn a tax advantage, and the proceeds will support the news you trust. Visit gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Seasons 4, the outdoor living store in Lexington, featuring over 100 styles of outdoor furniture delivered throughout New England, plus a wide selection of plants, statuary, and garden accessories. April event in progress. Seasons4.com. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. UMass, the state's flagship public research university, empowers students to be the future in the pursuit of progress for Massachusetts and beyond. More at umass.edu.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio.
Thank you.
89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I want to tell you real quick, tomorrow we're going to be back at the Boston Public Library. Dr. Ashish Jha, he was the presidential COVID advisor, and Sky and Telescope's Kelly Beatty on this first crewed mission around the moon since the 1970s. So that's pretty exciting.
CREWED is crewed.
With a crew in
case.
it. That's right.
Yeah,
People are going to be on the mission. That's right.
It's time now for another edition of On the Docket, and we're joined on Zoom by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner is a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Top of the morning or afternoon there, Judge Gardner. Good to see you.
I'm only a few miles away.
What?
It's the same time. Just want to be clear.
It's the same time.
Right.
Okay.
Nice to see you anyway.
So people are aware there may be changes to the ability of people to mail in their ballots and have them be counted after Election Day. Where do we think the Supreme Court is going to be on this?
Well, there are three possibilities. I mean, one is they say no mail-in ballots, no ballots received after Election Day may be counted. That's number one. Or they can say no ballots received after Election Day may be counted in the future, but not with respect to the November midterms. In other words, we're affecting a change, and the change, there's not enough time to implement the change, and so therefore it would go into effect in the future, not in November. Or alternatively, they can say mail-in ballots, which have been around for decades. The statute is ambiguous, and since it's ambiguous, states were free to interpret it as they chose. And since something like, 25 states allow for ballots to be received after Election Day, they could say, that's fine. That's within the range of what the federal statute outlined. So there's three alternatives. One, which would be chaos, which is the first, which is they declare no mail-in ballots may be counted if they're received after Election Day, even if they're postmarked before. What's interesting about that is that that hurts both Democrats and Republicans, by the way.
Yeah.
Since Republicans in rural areas rely on mail-in ballots. So who knows?
I'm sorry.
If they don't decide it until June, it seems there's an argument that is too close to the election, or does that not?
There is an argument that, yes, that's right. They could, and that's sort of their classic compromise. They say, we think this is wrong, but it's too close to the election to be implemented immediately. I have to admit, there are two different versions of two different accounts of the argument. New York Times thought it went dramatically against mail-in ballots. Others who have listened to it didn't think so. So nobody knows.
So everything I've read actually said that the conservatives had it. And the concern that was raised, I hope I articulate this well. If I don't, you'll fix it. That the primary argument being made by the justices who seem to think that mail-in ballots, if they're allowable, they're only allowable if received by Election Day. The argument was Election Day means Election Day in the statutes. And those concerned about this decision said, based upon that line of thinking, if a ballot, like in Massachusetts, is received within 3 days after an election is not appropriate because it's not received on Election Day, then early voting might be at risk too, which would be huge. A huge kind of thing. Do you subscribe to the same concern?
There's a concern that it would, mess up early voting. There's a concern that it would have an impact on the voting of soldiers and members of the military overseas. Although there's a different statute covering that, the language is very similar. So yeah, it could be chaos, which is another reason that whatever they do in June, they would say has to be implemented some other time.
So that's my last question. If something is found to be I assume you did this too when you were a judge. If something's found to be unconstitutional by a court, whether it's a district court judge or the Supreme Court, how are they able to say that even though it's unconstitutional, since it'll create great chaos, will have the unconstitutionality remain through one election cycle and will only implement this post-November? How do you
First of all, we're not talking about constitutional. This is
a statutory thing.
It's a statute. It's a statute that said Election Day is the date in November that we all vote. Now, that doesn't affect the argument, but they certainly could say, we understand that we're interpreting, this is a court that has had no problem laying waste to all sorts of precedents. So they could say, with respect to elections, that this is undoing precedent from years and years ago, and what's called a Purcell rule, which is not a mandatory rule, but is a policy that says you don't make changes, on the eve of elections that would effectively wreak havoc on the elections. That's actually that would affect the elections. So they could do this. They could certainly say, all the other precedent was wrong, but nevertheless, then we're going to change it, but we'll change it for the election after this one.
Nancy Gertner, one last thing that I bet you I've asked you in the past, so bear with me. You know some of these justices, and you've known Supreme Court justices through your time. How often does you take away Alito and Thomas, who, as far as I'm concerned, they don't even listen to the cases. They just know what they're going to decide before it even starts. But other justices, through your time in and around the bench, Roberts gives a speech without naming Trump, a number of them, saying you can't attack judges. He's obviously talking about Trump. And right after the speech, Trump attacks judges yet again. So does that Carolyn Leavitt, his a press person. On and on and on. And Donald Trump rails against mail-in ballots, and everybody has heard the story already, and then proceeds to vote by mail-in ballot, as does his whole family, in the Mar-a-Lago elections, which he lost, by the way, which is great. He has a Democrat representing him now there. Do you know, or do you believe you know of experiences where politics and the personal trumped the law in terms of Supreme Court decisions? You understand what I'm saying?
No, I understand, but can I translate what I think you're saying?
I wish you would. Yeah, go ahead.
Many people have asked me, don't the Supreme Court justices realize the havoc that Trump has wreaked?
That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
And don't they read the newspapers and understand that this is not a normal administration, and this is not a normal Republican, and this is not even a normal MAGA person? I think that they do. They live in the world. I think they live in the world. I think that every judge always had to struggle between what you knew in the world and what you thought the law required. So I think that they know. The impact is hard to say. In particular, when 15, 20 years from now, someone should talk to Justice Roberts, and ask him whether he understood that the immunity decision giving president immunity from prosecution had let loose in ways no one could have ever envisioned. He'd never admit it. He'd say that he was following the law, but surely they must be shaking their heads.
Did you ever come close to the line in one of your rulings?
What line is that?
The line where the surrounding politics and news of the world had as much of an impact on a decision as the law did.
It wasn't so much the news of the world, but in almost everyone I sentenced, I knew what the impact of the imprisonment would be. Yeah. I had been a criminal defense lawyer. I'd been in prisons. I'd interviewed people in prisons. I understood, acutely what that was like, and that figured in my decisions. So, I don't think that I ever directly thought about, what the next day would look like in terms of the press, et cetera. It's really quite interesting. The judges live in a little bit of a bubble, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that it enables you to focus on the job. It's a bad thing because you lose all sense of context.
I'd like to move into a bubble, by the way, as soon as I possibly could. We're speaking of former Judge Nancy Gertner.
So the birthright assassin case is coming up before the Supreme Court, too. And
Wednesday.
There was a piece in the Wall Street Journal that was saying, since Trump trashed the members of the Supreme Court who voted against him in the tariff case, maybe he's and maybe they're ticked off about that. I don't know, but that was one of their theories that might make it harder to do anything on birthright, which is, of course, a constitutional issue. So, what do you think?
Right. I don't think that I don't think that matters because the birthright citizenship issue is so clear. So, I mean, he could have, he could have written them love letters, and I don't think it's going to matter, or given them awards, or given them I don't think it's going to matter. I mean, I think that the issue is whether this Supreme Court is prepared to upend over 200 years of precedent, statutory law, settled understandings, and create chaos. I don't think that will happen.
So let me ask you to psychoanalyze somebody else then. The guy that's going to go in and argue this case, John Sauer, I mean, as everybody says, this birthright thing is always thought to be a fringe argument. I do wonder about some of these lawyers for Trump who are also very smart people. I mean, and their reputations, I think,
Who's he, the Solicitor General?
Yeah, he's the Solicitor General.
Okay.
Do you have any insight into his psychological state, Judge Gertner?
No. I mean, I keep on wanting to say, though, in some setting, there will be an after.
Yeah.
There will be an after
That's
Trump.
your
and the question is how people can deal with it. I was on an ABA panel. I don't know whether or not we talked about this the last time, where we were talking about what Trump has done to the Department of Justice. And I was on with John Lauro, who represented Trump in the January 6 cases, a superb lawyer. And when asked what about the changes that Trump has affected on the Department of Justice and the ways in which he's really distorted their mission, he gave a speech which sounded right out of Bondi's mouth, which said, if you had been attacked and prosecuted as Trump has, all of this is understandable in the light of what what was done to Trump when he wasn't president. To which I responded, shy as I am, no matter what your, what your concerns are, it doesn't justify fracturing the republic. In other words, it doesn't justify what he's doing now. So, what did
Lauro say to that?
He was silent.
Oh, good. I love it.
Called Bondi. They're going to prosecute Gardner. That's what's going to happen.
Right. But I mean, but what I'm saying is that he didn't have to speak like that. His time representing Trump was over.
Yeah.
So you take positions that get baked in, and you continue with that even after you've left the bench.
What's one of the great parts of this case, by the way? Where did we read this? That the lawyer for the ACLU, who is one of the people or the person arguing the case, is a birthright citizen herself, by the way. Her parents, I think, came from Taiwan. I asked you this question.
Are you moving on from this?
No, I asked you this question when we first knew they were going to take up the birthright citizenship case, the Supreme Court, and I forgot your answer. My understanding is generally the Supreme Court only takes cases primarily takes cases when they're different decisions from lower courts.
Conflict in the circuits, right.
Every single court, as far as I know, has ruled that the 14th Amendment controls here. Birthright citizenship is the law, is the constitution of the land. So why did they take this?
Well, I mean, they may well take something that simply has national importance, whether or not there's a conflict. And if you recall, the first time this case went up, they were dealing with nationwide injunctions. They didn't deal with the underlying claim. They were talking about the inappropriateness of a nationwide injunction. And what happened was that the cases went back down. There were class actions that effectively were nationwide class actions. And so it didn't affect the trajectory of these cases. No, you take cases that are of national significance. So
I should worry about that. That's the reason I asked the question. That would lead me to the worst possible conclusion. You're not worried that they took the case?
No, listen, I would have to go back and check, but the immunity decisions were almost overwhelmingly all in one direction, but they nevertheless took the immunity case because of its significance.
Well, but that feeds my fear. The immunity decisions were opposite to what the Supreme Court did, right?
Right. And I confidently predicted that it would go the other way, as I am doing now. I will confidently predict.
How many times did lay people like myself say, no one is above the law? Even the President of the United States, no one is above the law. I mean, we all heard that a million times during Watergate and Nixon and all those things.
We're only off by one.
Well, yeah, that's right. But I just want to, one thing, just as an aside, one of my theories and about why people, I don't know anything about this guy, Lauro, beyond what you just said, that he was involved in the January 6th defense of the president. But some of these lawyers, do this because they're going to make a lot of money as commentators on Fox News. And if they're not pro-Trump, they're not going to get a job as a commentator on Fox News. And Fox plays.
Aren't I making a lot of money on this show?
You are, actually. The check is going to be cut later today.
Tragically, you are not.
Nancy Gertner, there were several decisions, one most notable around places like Meta and YouTube. And some are suggesting the worm is about to turn. Could you tell us what happened and tell us which side of the worm issue you're on here?
Well, it was actually, these are very interesting verdicts because for the most part, social media platforms have been inoculated from any kind of litigation for the kinds of things people post on them. They're not responsible. They're not accountable for the things that people post on them in the same way that, the manufacturer of a microphone wouldn't be responsible for what people say. This is very different. These cases, the theory of these cases was that the design of the platform is addictive, that the way in which some of the stuff I have to admit I didn't completely understand, sort of infinite scrolling and some of the algorithms make it particularly addictive. And they were taking a page from the book of the lawsuits against tobacco.
Right.
Where essentially they were saying that the tobacco companies made the product to be addictive. I don't know where I come out against this. It does seem to me that regulation of social media is entirely appropriate, and the question is how to do it. Regulation by litigation like this is sometimes not the best way to do it because it's a little chaotic. You're responding to a lawsuit. Congress should hold hearings and talk about what
they should get rid of this Section 230. It drives me insane. Why is it that newspaper reporters get sued? I get sued. Newspaper reporters get sued all the time if you make a mistake. Television people get sued. Radio people get sued. The idea that they are somehow immune when they are making money hand over fist, I think it is just disgraceful.
And as Nancy Gertner said, just so people are clear, the Section 230 that we've talked about a lot here is a thing that, as Judge Gertner suggested,
Decency Act.
The platform cannot be held legally responsible for that which is posted.
It's
on
like a
that
telephone.
platform.
Telephone company can't be held responsible for what you said on the phone. And so if it's analogized to a platform rather than a newspaper that is endorsing what's on the platform, then that's the reason why they've escaped liability. These cases are saying that there's something about the design here.
These cases are different. These cases, you're absolutely right. This is about the addiction thing. But the idea that you can have pictures of women, girls on different bodies and online, and you can harass these people endlessly, and you don't take these pictures down. The stuff that they get away with, to me, is, beyond the whole addiction thing, is just outrageous because they could police it. They don't want to because it's going to cost them a lot of money.
Well, I think that we ought to, if we had a Congress that was actually functioning, we would do a deep dive into how to regulate this. Right. And how to regulate this in a meaningful way. But again, regulation by litigation is hard because you say this is not right, but you don't necessarily say what is right. What's the alternative? And that ought to be done by legislation and some serious thinking about it.
By the way, there's another argument without going into great depth about this today. The concern by some who share many of your goals is the only platforms that will continue to exist are the hugest of them because the smaller platforms couldn't afford what would be endless litigation. And as a result, they'd censor a lot of stuff, over-censor a lot of stuff on their platforms to make it less likely they'd get sued. So only the big boys would survive. So there is another problem beyond.
Well, I just don't think it's, either something is factual or it's not factual. It's different than opinion. The stuff, Fox News eventually got sued for almost $1 billion.
No, but that's different. As Judge Gertner said, they're basically endorsing what they produce. These are pass-throughs. I'm not, by the way, defending these companies, but just like the phone company, as Judge Gertner said, is a pass-through. She didn't use that language, but that's what the notion is.
To me, the phone company is different because I presume that it's a conversation between people, or among people, I should say, as opposed to something that you just post. I don't know.
Right, to some degree, to Jim's point, it also has enabled a democratization of the public sphere.
Yeah.
Anyone can post anything. That is both good and bad, but it also enables voices that are not usually heard. And if you wind up, I mean, now this kind of litigation, the expense of this litigation could lead the platforms to begin to censor in ways that we wouldn't want, which is why, I mean, this is a classic situation where you need to sort of evaluate this, consider the unintended consequences, and go from there.
This is about the fourth time in this conversation Judge Gertner said, what Jim is trying to say, and then she explained it in English, which is one of the reasons she's paid so well to be on the show. Okay, so let me tell you, I'm about a week away from being 98 years old, so I'm particularly sensitive to this thing.
Oh,
here is 98-year-old Judge Pauline Newman. Do you know her, by the way?
I know of her.
Okay. Pauline Newman is speaking to the new Civil Liberties Alliance about why she is taking her case to the Supreme Court of the United States.
I thought that it was ridiculous and that I should not succumb or set a pattern of judicial colleagues being able to bully and intimidate and force out a colleague they don't like who writes dissents.
Now, she is on the patent court or something, and essentially the chief judge, I think I got this right, has suspended her ability to take future cases because they're concerned about her cognitive abilities, even though she sounds fine to me at 98 years old. I read this morning the average federal judge is 69 years old. 30% of them are over 75. Should that concern us, Judge Gertner?
I won't tell you how old I am, but
I'm going to look it up. But go ahead.
I think, yeah, it should concern. The problem is that coming up with the sort of ad hoc, spur of the moment age limits is, as we say in the law, under-inclusive and over-inclusive. Some 50-year-olds are losing it, and some 98-year-olds are fabulous. And what there ought to be is simply a rule. I mean, in other words, putting aside Pauline Newman's case, there ought to be every other court system has, including Massachusetts State Court, has mandatory retirement.
70 here, right? Is it 70?
That's right. Yeah. And and since I'm past 70, I think that's young. But I do think that we should come up with rules so that this doesn't happen, because she's right. It could be that there are people who are going after her because she's old. It also could be there are people going after her because they don't like what she's saying. So we have to have rules. We should have a retirement age.
The one thing that surprised me was everything around which normal people would say there should be rules. I agree with you completely, by the way. There should be rules. We say to ourselves, well, we can't do this because the party in power doesn't like it, and then the next party in power doesn't, whatever. Who is against which party? Where's the partisan interest in having 90-year-olds be
No, I don't
judges?
think that there is. I think that there's an issue around the Supreme Court. I mean, there have been proposals to have mandatory retirement for the Supreme Court, and the significance of that is it then enforces rotation on the Supreme Court, as opposed to, in our case, candidly locking in a 6-3 super conservative majority. Now, that could happen in any given term, but if you have retirement age, you wind up with some rotation, whereas here we don't. It's completely chaotic, and the people stay on the court for as long as they live.
One last question. We discussed with you a lot that you and Larry Tribe were, I think, the Massachusetts representatives, or, well, you're not representing Massachusetts, but from Massachusetts on that presidential commission about the Supreme Court. And if I remember correctly, you went in supporting term limits and against the expansion of the court, and you flipped, I think, primarily because I'm wrong about that. I think.
Yeah, you've gotten that wrong numbers of times.
I got it backwards?
Oh. Yeah, no, we didn't flip on anything. We just focused. I mean, it was just.
No, you did flip because you figured out that you learned that one required a constitutional amendment and expansion did not. Wasn't I right about that?
Well, yes and no. Certainly a retirement age, there were very creative ways of putting a retirement age.
That's my question. Would a retirement age require a constitutional amendment?
There were creative ways where essentially you stay as a judge, but your duties are now different, where you could be, you could ride circuit with other courts. You'd stay as a judge because essentially that's the minimum constitutional requirement. but you could have other duties. And that could be, so it was an open question that the question of term limits, raised questions about the Constitution's comment about for life, term for life. And so, but there were creative ways around that. The retirement age, it would be the same kind of thing where you can retire from the Supreme Court but still have other obligations. So there is a way around it. We ultimately said expand the court because that had no constitutional issues whatsoever. That could happen.
It's happened a lot of times, right?
Judge Gertner, can't you be a judge emeritus in Massachusetts?
That's what she's talking about.
You can be a senior judge, not in the state court. The state court is a hard 70, you're out. Some people can be recalled, but only there are certain rules with respect to that. On the federal side, you can be a senior judge. And take as many cases or as few cases as you wanted. And I am fully retired because I have a big mouth and I wanted to just.
We noticed, by the way.
That was it.
Judge Gardner, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate it.
I'm glad you do because many times when you were a judge, I thought it would be great to talk to Nancy Gertner about this, and of course we couldn't. So we're very glad you can talk about these things now. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
See you.
We've been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a Boston Public Radio contributor. Okay, coming up after this quick break, this is a Jim obsession. We're doing it again.
Excuse me, it's a Marjorie obsession too.
Okay.
This was one of our major campaigns in commercial radio.
No, we get nowhere.
Yet another unsuccessful campaign. Go ahead.
The number of older drivers on the road is climbing. So as we age, forget about judges. Now we're talking about people with their driver's licenses. They're keeping them for longer than ever before. Should we have age limits? We're going to ask you about age limits on drivers. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, we meet a woman living a double life. By day, a school librarian. By night, everyone's Woman of the Year for 1776, American icon Abigail Adams from Weymouth. Then that guy in Falmouth whose 11-year-old yellow lab had to get rescued from a 12-foot sinkhole in his yard. That's the Curiosity Desk today at 1 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company, offering local, long-distance office and piano moving with 23 locations throughout New England and across the country. More information at gentlegiant.com.
And the Boston Speaker Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Pete Buttigieg, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, historian Doris Kearns-Goodwin, and financial journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin. BostonSpeakers.org.
Welcome back to BPR and 89.7 GBH. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're ending the show with an ageless, timeless question. Should older drivers be forced to give up their licenses when they hit a certain age, or at least be required to take a road test? We're inspired by not only our old campaign that was wildly unsuccessful, but by some great reporting on NPR by Joel Rose. I think it was this morning. Was it this morning? Whenever it was. The number of older
I heard it over the weekend, I think.
Oh, whatever. Okay, so this weekend. The number of older drivers hanging on to their driver's license is climbing as we all live longer than ever before. The rules vary by state. Some require vision tests or more visits to the RMV to renew driver's licenses. In some states, reports Rose, doctors and police can report drivers they think are unsafe. Teenagers are still by far the riskiest group of drivers, but crash rates start rising again for drivers in their 80s. So should we impose age-based driving limits? How do we balance freedom and mobility that driving offers those of advanced age with the danger level question? And by the way, if you've dealt with this issue with your if an adult, with your more adult parents, let us know how you dealt with it. 877-301-8970. When Marjorie and I were in commercial radio, we got involved in this campaign thanks to former Senator, the late Brian Joyce, was deeply concerned about this thing. And he told us a story. I'm going to read you the first paragraph in a brilliant piece I wrote for the Globe.
Brilliant piece.
12 years ago.
That's right. That's why we're doing this.
And then Brian Joyce, it's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because of the NPR thing. Here is Brian Joyce told us this story, former Senator Brian Joyce. The 81-year-old came into the Plymouth Police Department to explain that after leaving a wedding the prior week, he'd driven his car into a snowbank. When the officers checked, they confirmed the man had been at the Country Club of Halifax, but had exited through the wrong gate and ended up not in a snowbank, but a sand trap on the golf course. It was August. In any case, there was no harm done there, but it was a perfect example of the fact that we're in a state, for example, every state is different, as I said. If you take a driver's test at 16 and you pass it, when do you take your next driver's test if you're 100, Marjorie?
Never.
Never. Again, you take vision tests every 5 or 10 years, but you can keep driving. And when I did this piece, I'm sure it's worse now. This is 12 years ago. I wrote this thing for the Globe. There were 9 drivers with licenses 103 years old or older. There were 1,965 drivers in Massachusetts who were 96 to 99. It's a real problem. And by the way, on the serious note here, it is an independence and mobility thing, and I know a lot of over it. And the solution is the state's got to get involved. If it turns out you don't have family members to drive you around, there's got to be some sort of free or affordable public transportation that's accessible to older people so they don't lose their mobility, you know?
That's right.
I
think the reason it would be good if the state did something to avoid these awful situations that children talk about when they're trying to get their parents or their grandparents to give up their licenses, where, one of these stories here that the guy, he drove around till he's 94 years old, and one day he drove up onto a sidewalk that was for people instead of cars, and the child, who was, I don't know how old the kid was, but this guy was pretty old, and he became irate, and they had to steal the keys of the parents because this guy would not give up his car keys. He insisted he was fine driving. That's one of the problems. I think you don't realize that you're not a good driver, so it avoids the family strife.
So what do you think the solution is? By the way, the solution in a number of states, which is not a solution, we thought it was a solution early on, is give the responsibility to the doctor. But what older people stopped doing, they just didn't go to the doctor because they didn't want to lose their license.
I think you need to take a driving test.
Yeah.
But you know what?
And if they're not going to institute a driving test, then they have to set an age limit on how old you can drive. That's it.
Apparently they have an age limit in Illinois, but you know what it is?
What?
87.
Really?
That seems kind of high. I don't know, but anyway, we have this is to illustrate my point. This poor person. This is from this NPR report by Joel Rose. He reported on the difficult decision that children have to make to take away their parents' car keys. Now, here's this Jacqueline Hamilton. She chose to take the keys from her 94-year-old father, the guy I just talked about, James Stubbs, after several incidents. Here's how that played out.
When he gets angry, he at one point, one phone call, he just says, "I hate you." And my response is, "I love you." And he said, "I hate you."
I asked Hamilton's father, James Stubbs, how he feels about this now. Do you understand why she did it? Why she felt like she had to?
She felt like she had to. She didn't have to.
Yeah, I would say the more I hear, the more I believe she did have to.
Well, she did have to, but that's what in these stories, this is what people have to do. They have to resort. Another story, somebody goes to the hospital, and when they're in the hospital, they replace the keys or steal the keys. I mean, you don't want to have to be in that situation with your parents.
Why? For when we were involved in this crusade, again, failed on our part 15 years ago. Do you remember the regional office of the ARP put out a newsletter saying we were terrorists? Yeah. They used the word terrorists around our behavior in this because, as Marjorie said, our view, which I thought is so painfully obvious, you just have to take a driver's test when you hit whatever, 60, 65, 70, that sort of thing. Why?
Well,
who could be against that?
They've got a quote here from the AARP in Illinois where they says the right to drive should be based on ability, not on age.
Fine, so testability.
That's right. So I don't see why they were so opposed to our saying there should be some kind of testing. But in any case, 877-301-896. They didn't like you. Well, that could
shocking.
But the question is, do you want to deal with this with your aging parents, or do you want the state to take it out of your hands so you don't have to deal with your parents never speaking to you again because after they've driven up on the sidewalk several times, you think that maybe they shouldn't drive anymore?
Sometimes it gets a lot worse. You talk about whatever you want, but you wrote that story. You interviewed that woman who drove into the doctor's office and killed somebody.
The reception area of a hospital.
I know, it was horrible. She had no idea what she was doing, right?
Well, when I went to interview her,
She was out of it.
She was out of it.
Yeah, shouldn't have been driving.
Yeah.
Karen in Providence, you're first. What's the fix? What's the solution?
Oh, I don't know what the solution is. Well, I guess the solution is that we have to know the elderly person's ability. So I was just telling the woman that answered the phone that when my mom was like 81, 82, we were having a party at my brother's house in Bellingham, Massachusetts, which my mother lived in Bellingham at the time. And she pulled in the driveway, comes to the party and wants to leave. And in the process of leaving, she wiped out 3 cars that were in the driveway, and she didn't realize it. Did not realize it.
So what'd you do? What'd you do?
So she left, and then people noticed, we have we're all dented in. And we determined it was my mother because she was the first one that left. And then all of a sudden we get a call like 45 minutes later. She lives in Bellingham. She was in Framingham and didn't know where she was.
So what'd you do?
And so one of my brothers talked her into how to get home. And then we proceeded to take away her license, take away her keys, and take away her car.
How'd she handle that?
Oh, not well. Not well.
Yeah.
Not well at all.
You did the right
So,
thing.
Karen, would it have been easier for you if there were just a straight state limit that the state set so you wouldn't have to get into this?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Hey,
You
Karen.
can blame it on the governor.
Sorry you had to deal with this.
Or the Registry of Motor Vehicles.
Thanks for sharing your story. Here's an anonymous texter.
Yeah.
We told my grandfather his car was stolen. Periodically, he would ask if any progress was being made finding it. He passed before it was ever, quote, found. Yeah. I mean, you hear a lot of stories like that. That's what you got to do. You see, one of the other stories, not Joel Rose piece, is the guy never drove, but he wanted the right to drive.
Yeah.
So they just pulled, just to be safe, they pulled away the keys that were the actual keys to the car and replaced it with keys to another car that they didn't have.
That's right.
And the guy thought he would walk by the key ring or the key hook or whatever.
And one of these guys,
think he had the keys.
One of these guys, I think it was the guy we just played the sound of, when he went to the Department of Public Safety out in Minnesota to request a driver's exam. It did not go well. She said the guy, he couldn't remember the day, the year, the day of the week. Everything was all wrong. And then he got mad about the questions in the test. So
do you remember, even though we are both pro taking a driver's test, every 10, 15, whatever number of years, at least after a certain age. And the thing that aggravates me is please don't call and say, well, then everybody at every age should have to retake the driver's test. Well, the reality is people from 25 to 60 or 70 are not nearly as likely to get involved in a crash.
Teenagers are the biggest crashers.
That? No, but do you remember
yes.
2 or 3 times ago when we did this topic on the air, a caller from the Registry of Motor Vehicles called us and said he passed. There's only a vision test in Massachusetts. He passed the person on the vision test, even though they couldn't see a damn thing, because he felt bad for them. So the point is, they might pass people on the driver's test too, because they feel bad for them, which means there may need to be an age limit,
This person is texting about this. My 17-year-old son gets into an accident. He may be going 70 miles an hour. My 89-year-old dad, however, may be going 15 miles per hour. And that's a good point. But the problem is, like this guy that was up on the sidewalk, he could have run over somebody. And there's awful stories in here about how would you feel, or how would your elderly parent feel if they ran over some 12-year-old
it's horrible.
on a bike?
They got to do something.
Okay, we have to take a quick break.
By the way, the legislature during its 5-month break is going to address this issue. Do you know that? They are.
I know. I mean, the legislature.
Yeah, it's good.
Do you think that's why they won't come on the show, Jim, because we criticize them too much? I think that may be it.
Maybe.
Okay, you're listening to
By the way, there are a lot of good rank and file members up there.
I mean, the leadership.
There are. I understand that.
Karen Spilka, she came on our show once.
She came on our show a number of times.
She did?
Yeah.
What happened?
She said they're dead to me. That's what she said to us. No, she didn't. That's not true. That's not true.
Okay, we're going to take more of your calls and texts at 877-301-8970. We're reacting to Jim's brilliant piece, which he brings up every year, even though he wrote it like 20 years ago.
I wrote it in 1942. ran the centennials coming up on that piece.
But it's still great, still relevant about whether you want the state to make it harder for people who are quite elderly in their 80s or unable to drive to keep driving. I'm Marjorie Egan, Houston Browdy, listening to BPR 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Massachusetts gateway cities have been in some major need of TLC, but in Revere, people are already starting to see the results of the state's efforts to bring life back to these neighborhoods.
The Shirley Ave neighborhood is probably one of the most transformed neighborhoods. I would even contest that it's one of the most largely transformed neighborhoods in the Commonwealth over the last decade.
I'm Trajan Warren. That story later today on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Newbury Court, serving Concord, Massachusetts for 30 years as a not-for-profit continuing care retirement community dedicated to older adults. More at newburycourt.org.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping customers achieve their vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding them from design to completion. With showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH 89.7. I'm Jim Browder. She's Marjorie. And we're talking about a longtime crusade of not just mine, Marjorie's as well. She's just embarrassed because we've been losing this for 25 years, to have older drivers take a driver's test every bunch of years to see if they're still capable of driving. Everybody acknowledges it's a problem. Well, not everybody. Almost everybody acknowledges it's a problem. And everybody acknowledges there's nothing tougher than being the adult child of an older person and trying to take away their keys, so maybe the state should play a role. 877-301-89.7.
Here's a texter. My husband is so stubborn and crotchety in his 50s, I've decided to solve this problem down the road by wrecking our car and then tell him we can't get another one.
That's a good one. Janice and Hingham, hi.
Hi there. I'm actually on the road myself, and I just wanted to say that I had a long conversation with my mom before she stopped driving about when she might want to do it. Mm-hmm. And she had surgery, and then she gave it up. We asked her if we could sell her car, and she gave it up. The challenge has been that now she needs to find help to get around and get her groceries. She lives in a community that is that really doesn't have those kind of services, and I live out of state, so it is challenging. But I think the best thing for children to do, of elder parents, is to have conversations well in advance.
That's brilliant.
And also to plan in advance, look to find out what services are available. And I mean, it's doable, but I don't envy anybody who had to have that fight.
Why did your mother not resist? Janice, why did she not resist, do you think?
I think actually she didn't really like driving, and I think she was nervous about driving too. But I also wanted to mention before I hang up, the New York Times recently had a dementia. You'll have to look it up, but it's a video practice game that elder people can do.
Wow.
To try to drive longer. So somebody should look that up, because that was brilliant. And I've been doing it once or twice a month just to.
Wow, we'll check it out. Janice, thanks.
It's a game you play to get she can drive longer. Is that what she said?
That's what she said. Yeah, in the New York Times.
Okay.
Thank you, Janice, for your call. We appreciate it.
My 78-year-old father refused to give up his license, but then he drove through a puddle that was so deep it destroyed the engine of his car, and then he decided maybe he needed to stop driving. A lot of people are having terrible problems with their parents that think that there's no problem. Somebody else said if you start saying it earlier before they need to...
That's what Janice just said.
Yeah. It's
Start
very
preparing
helpful.
so it's not quite as jarring.
I mean,
but
the
you need
thing
an
is,
alternative. By the way, just like you, who were you talking to before where we said Europe is doing the right thing and the United States is not? What was the topic earlier in the show?
There's somebody just texted about that too. They make it, that was about Corby Kummer, where they regulate food.
Right, exactly.
They don't want the people to eat food that are going to give them terrible diseases.
In a decent number of Western European nations, they do provide transportation for older people who can't drive.
But
of
I
course,
can't find
we
it
would never
now.
do that here.
No.
Okay, let's go to Marie in Chester, New Hampshire. Hi, Marie.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a senior. I'm 73 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that driving should be based on age, not on age, on ability.
Okay.
It makes me very angry because we have tons and tons of teenage accidents, very deadly accidents. And the minute you hear of a senior driving into something, it's all over the news. It's not, we don't compare with teenage accidents.
Okay, but wait a second. So how do you feel about older, let's pick a number, 70, 75, taking a driver's test to prove they still can do it?
That's fine if you want to give them a driver's test. But don't take away a license based on their age.
I hear you.
Where I live in the country, there is no access to anything. There's no family around.
Yeah.
You're going to condemn me to live in my house the rest of my life? The nearest supermarket is 20 miles away. You run out of milk for your coffee or bread or anything else, and you have no transportation? And
Well, what happens, but you agreed, Marie, that a driver's test is appropriate. What happens when you fail that, I don't mean you, one generically fails that driver's test? What happens then?
Then they're condemned to stay in their home because most of the places don't have services for seniors.
Well, the answer is
I mean, that's the big argument, actually, Marie, is that people don't have transportation, so they can't go run, as you say, down and get a cup of coffee or CVS or get their medication or whatever else it is. But, you know, when you see a lot of these...
Marie, thank you for your call,
When you see a
by the
lot of
way.
these accidents with older people, it's almost always the same thing. They say they mistook the gas
and
for the brakes.
Exactly.
They thought they were putting their foot in the brakes and their foot
Well, I
in
had a
the
solution
gas.
for that.
What was that, Jim?
When you're older, you just switch the pedals. Go to take it to the gas. By the way, I'm trying to look this up.
You know-
Let me just say, the caller said there's this game or test. It's either called Drive Sharp or Drive Fit in the New York Times, which is which is a thing you can do that judges your cognitive abilities to drive.
You know, when I was a kid, I used to drive sometimes in the maiden aunts, and the maiden aunts, and they became...
When you were underage, you mean?
I don't know how old I was.
Okay.
I don't think I could drive, or
Okay.
they didn't want me to drive probably because I was a teenager, whatever, but they were shrinking, and they had to put the yellow pages on the seat so they could see over the top of the steering wheel because they lost 3 or 4 inches. They were down to about 4
You know what they're
foot
called?
9.
Q-tips.
Q-tips, the little tuft of gray hair sticking up. And I remember I drive with them, and, they would getting onto the highway, when you have to come off the exit to get on the highway, they would always stop at the end of the ramp. I was always thinking, oh God, we're going to get rear-ended. We're going to get rear-ended. You got to move. And they drove. I mean, they drove well into their 80s and 90s.
They did.
Yes.
90s?
I did. Yes, they lived a long time. I stopped driving with them after a while.
Really?
Yeah, but it was.
I stopped driving with you when you were like 45. Let me tell you, for the same reasons.
Let's compare our accident rate, Jim.
Well, my car ever.
That was
You've
just
driven
once.
a car without a bumper.
You know why?
Yeah, because the bumper got knocked off when you got in an accident.
Yeah, you know why? Because I got rear-ended.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. It's not true. I was there.
I didn't rear-end the person.
Okay.
I think you have rear-ended people.
Maybe I have,
I have
Marjorie.
been rear-ended. And then you know what?
No.
If you rear-ended, Jim, it's never your fault.
That's exactly right.
Exactly right. If you are the rear-ender, then it is always your fault.
Okay, let's move on. I didn't mean to create a whole thing here. Monique in Norwell. Oops, you only have about 30 seconds,
Sorry.
Monique. Hi,
Oh, sorry.
Marjorie talked too much. Go ahead, Monique.
Hi there. How are you today?
Quickly, we're great. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that we always kept an eye on my mom, and she decided herself when it was time. But what we did is she kept her car and she drove around where she lived, but she never went on the road. So she came up to the road, she'd turn around, and then come drive around again at her place. And that was fine for her. I think she just needed to feel some control, some independence.
So kind of drive around the block
on.
kind of thing.
Yeah, well, within her community, where she lived. so there was no chance. I mean, I took her on the road once on the highway, and I thought she'd have a heart attack.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I think, yeah.
Glad it worked out.
If I had-
We got to go, Monique. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but we have to cut you off because we're
we have to go.
sort of
We're out of time.
thing.
But sorry, there were a lot of texts and calls on this. Sorry we didn't get to them all.
Huge
but,
number.
Next time, that's because Jim,
You say
wrote
hello to
about it in
Edgar?
1992. Okay. Hi, Edgar.
Hi.
What's on the show?
Did you follow the story last week? Pretty big deal story. There was a dog went down a sinkhole in Falmouth. Yes, obviously. Big story. He got rescued, makes international headlines. Well, now, after all the fanfares, we're going to talk with the owner of the dog and get the inside story of what it was like as it was happening and how it's been essentially being an international celebrity since.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
you have
a
the
good
dog
one.
on, or you have...
We do not have the dog on, Jim. We
dog.
tried to get the dog, but not only is he not allowed to drive, but he doesn't respond to emails. So, yeah.
You got to try harder. I mean, you really got to push to get some of these
It was a lab
guys.
or a retriever? What was it?
Golden lab. Yellow lab. Sorry, yellow lab.
Oh,
Yellow
my
lab.
gosh. Stuck in a sinkhole.
Stuck in a sinkhole.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I guess one of the keys to getting him out was some pepperoni. That helped along the way. Inch him into the
That would
harness.
get me out
I
of a
know.
hole, let me tell you. Or into a hole.
Yeah. Remember that,
Depending
Jim.
on how you look
if you
at
go
it,
into a
Jim, yeah.
sinkhole, we'll stand at the top with a bunch of sausage.
With a tube of liverwurst, just
That's
squeezing
right.
it down.
That would
into
absolutely...
Oh, that's a good one, Edgar.
Yeah, we're very excited. We're very excited.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Edgar starts right after us with the dog in the sinkhole.
Before you go
The owner of
ahead,
the dog in the sinkhole.
Chronicle, the great show Chronicle, did a story. This may be the thing that they say that the game or program is called Active. Check that out too.
Okay, Active.
ACTIV.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much for tuning in today. We have a podcast, Boston Public Radio. We have a TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're back at the library speaking with CNN's John King, physician and public health leader, and the guy who basically ran the COVID response for Joe Biden, Dr. Ashish Jha. Sky and Telescope's Kelly Beatty, ahead of NASA's latest moon launch, the first one with people in it since the 70s.
64
right?
years.
It's unbelievable.
And NBC Sports, Training Casey. We're going to talk about a little bit about March Madness. Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, Brad Lewis ran our YouTube stream today. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jane Bologna. The Curiosity Desk with Edgar B. Heard III, talking to the owner of the dog that went down the sinkhole. Rescued
Only the
by
best for our listeners here.
Can I say something? I don't want to.
I love dog
I don't
stories.
want to
I do
bitch
too.
about
I do
Edgar.
too.
Because I feel bad about saying this.
Yep.
We have the dog tomorrow. So, I mean, you got somebody, but we got the damn
We're just setting it
dog.
up for
Yeah.
you. We're the opening act,
Yeah,
Jim.
we did have a llama once in the studio. Remember that?
That
A
is
llama
legendary.
That
with
was
red
great.
shoes on. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
The
sorry.
Curiosity Desk next, and then the Culture Show with Jared Bowen starts at 2. They're going to speak with retired federal FBI agent Geoffrey Kelley about his new book, 13 Perfect Fugitives, about the Gardner heist. I am Marjorie Egan.
Jim Browdy.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. We don't really
Bye.
have the dog tomorrow, though. Maybe
No,
we'll
we do
surprise
have the dog
everybody.
tomorrow.
We do have the dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Edgar.
Yeah.
See you later. Thank you for
By the
tuning
way,
in.
that person who told me about the Chronicle show, I just say it was Anthony Everett.
Oh, thank
One
you,
of the
Anthony
hosts
Everett.
of Chronicle.
We love Anthony Everett.
We love him. Thanks,
we love
Anthony.
that. We love Chronicle.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
From the stories of centuries past to discoveries that will define our future, How Did We Get Here's how-tos and more. Journey with us down the rabbit hole on the Curiosity Desk. Coming up next on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Landvest Christie's International Real Estate, an independent brokerage representing residential and investment properties for buyers and sellers across New England and the Adirondacks since 1968. More at landvest.com.
And Porter Square Books, hosting Life of Pi author Jan Martel for his new novel, Son of Nobody, a retelling of the Trojan War from the perspective of two commoners. April 3rd, info at portersquarebooks.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News.
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, when a jury gets presented with DNA evidence linking a defendant to a crime scene, it can seem like an open and shut case. But the truth, as always, is a little more complicated. It's not junk science, but something more twisted and prevalent. Then we meet a woman living a double life. By day, a school librarian. By night, everyone's Woman of the Year for 1776, American icon, Weymouth's own Abigail Adams. Then it's the owner of an 11-year-old yellow lab who had to get rescued from a 12-foot sinkhole last week. Yes, Tessie is fine. The news would go on to make national and international headlines. So what's it like when your dog becomes the feel-good story of the week? That's ahead this hour on the Curiosity Desk.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump says the U.S. is in serious discussions to end the war in Iran. He claims progress has been made. He also says if the economically vital Strait of Hormuz does not open for business immediately, more attacks will come. Here's NPR's Deepa Shivaram.
Trump posted on social media that a deal with Iran will probably be reached. But if it doesn't, he says the U.S. will resume attacks on Iran, specifically on their electrical plants, oil wells, and Karg Island. Trump says the island holds a large majority of Iran's oil exports. He also threatened Iran's desalination plants. The president had previously said that Iran had until April 6th to open the strait. The White House did not respond to requests for comment on whether Trump's newest post negates that initial deadline. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News, the White House.
Russia says its oil tanker has arrived in Cuba, which has been facing blackouts and an effective U.S. blockade. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports that the Russians say they notified the United States in advance.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Russia has a duty to help its friends in Cuba and raise the issue of the tanker with U.S. officials ahead of time. A senior Trump administration official tells NPR that President Trump is allowing this ship to reach Cuba for humanitarian purposes. These decisions are made on a case-by-case basis, the official wrote in an email, adding that Cuba's economy won't be fixed until there's dramatic political change. President Trump told reporters on Sunday that he's focused on Iran right now, but in his words, Cuba will be next. He says it doesn't bother him if Russia or any other countries want to send a boat of oil. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The U.S. Embassy in Caracas, Venezuela is formally open again. The State Department saying it has resumed normal operations at the site that was shut down for 7 years since Trump's first term in office. Washington restored full diplomatic relations after U.S. troops conducted a raid in January and seized then Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife to face drug trafficking charges in New York. Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, workers are supposed to be getting paid again. The expectation was paychecks would start going out today under President Trump's emergency order. This even though Congress has been unable to strike a deal on funding DHS and end the shutdown. After weeks working without pay, Georgia-based union rep Aaron Barker says TSA workers deserve $10,000 bonuses for what they've been through.
We've had a lot of officers that have been evicted. Their cars have been repossessed. You have the negative impacts, late fees, and all of those things. Those numbers pile up. So that $10,000 would assist in recouping some of the things that have negatively impacted their finances in their life.
That's Union Representative Aaron Barker. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 250 points. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. There are currently 6 candidates looking to take over the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, currently overseen by DA Michael Morrissey. Brookline.News reports the race comes after Morrissey, who's had the job since 2010, announced in January that he would not seek re-election. Morrissey's tenure has drawn increasing scrutiny in recent years over how his office handled several high-profile cases, the highest being the 2 trials of Karen Reed, who was charged with killing her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, in 2022. Another case that Morrissey's overseeing is that of Sandra Birchmore, a 23-year-old woman found dead in her Canton apartment in 2021. Her death was initially ruled a suicide, and Morrissey's office said it found no evidence of foul play. However, federal prosecutors later alleged that Birchmore was killed by a former Stoughton police officer who staged the scene to appear as a suicide. Brookline Interactive Group, or BIG, Brookline's nonprofit public access TV station and community media center, is furloughing some of its employees. The decision comes as Big deals with money problems caused by the sharply decreasing funding to the town from cable companies, which are required by law to share 5% of their local revenue with communities like Brookline in the form of free cable franchise fee. In addition to the plummeting revenue and from cable companies, Big has for several years been taking advantage of a large grant from the American Rescue Plan Act, but those funds are also going away. 61 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at progressivecommercial.com.
Listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. For a jury, it would all seem pretty straightforward. DNA evidence linking a suspect to a murder weapon at the scene of a crime. Pretty open and shut, no? Well, in reality, prosecutors supposedly rock-solid DNA evidence in ways contradictory with reality. It's not quite junk science, but something potentially more, one might say, twisted. Well, that's exactly how Boston Globe reporter David Scharfenberg would put it. David is also deputy editor of the Globe's Ideas section, and he joins us now. David, welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so this series, you've written a story as part of a series called Twisted Science, and we make a distinction between twisted science and junk science, or at least you do. What is that distinction?
Right. So I think when most people, you say, what's wrong with forensic science? They'll say, oh, junk science, right? Kind of made up stuff. And you'll hear about things like bite mark analysis. Like some dentist will get up on a stand and say, oh, those little marks in someone's neck, that matches perfectly with this person's, dental imprints. And that's all kind of nonsense and has been thankfully mostly pushed out of the courtroom at this point. But what we're left with is something more subtle, which is legitimate forms of science like DNA analysis or, chemistry that they use to look at, say, drugs, that kind of thing. That's legitimate science, but it can be twisted, as we say in our series, in different ways, kind of presented in ways that are misleading.
And, here, I think when you say DNA around here, anybody who's followed the news for some time, they think, oh, well, crime lab scandals, like people falsifying evidence or something like that. That's also not what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Or the name that will often come up in this context is Annie Ducan, from the case from a few years ago. For listeners who aren't familiar, she just made up thousands of drug results, just complete nonsense. Those are the kind of things people have heard of, these big, flashy, lab scandals or junk science. And this is something different, and research suggests actually much more common.
So you begin this series with an article that focuses on a particular case. So I want you to, if you could, give us a brief sense of this case. This is the Terrell Barrows case. If folks haven't read this, what happened here, and why do you use this as your entry point?
Sure. So back in the summer of 2012, this guy, Terrell Barrows, who was from the New Bedford area, would travel every weekend with a group of friends to a club in downtown Providence, right on the edge of kind of downtown Providence, called Club Monet. And one night he brings another friend who's not in this kind of core group he usually goes with. And this guy's name was Stephen Bowden. And they're all in the club having fun. And then there's, at the end of the night, a confrontation with two guys this group doesn't know. And it kind of eventually spills out into the parking lot outside. Two gunshots. One of these guys takes a bullet to the abdomen, another one to the leg. And the two guys who are on the scene right there are Terrell Barrows and his friend Stephen Bowden. There's an off-duty cop who's working a security detail at the club that night, so he's there in seconds. So the case really comes down to which of these two guys pulled the trigger. And Stephen Bowden actually seems to admit to it on the scene. A cop pulls him out of the car and he says, it's me, it's all mine. The DNA testing actually says Bowden's DNA is on the gun, and it excludes Terrell Barrows. So all the signs seem to be pointing to this guy, Stephen Bowden, as a shooter. But the guy who's shot in the abdomen, who will soon die, they do a quick kind of what they call a show up in the parking lot. A show up.
So what's a show up?
Show up. They drag the two, in this case, the two possible suspects before him and say, "Did this guy shoot you?" Then they drag the other guy before him. "Did this guy shoot you?" He seems
in the moment
before he dies, a few hours later at the hospital.
Wow.
And this guy who's on his last legs here seems to indicate with a nod of the head that Terrell Barros is the shooter. So, we speaking of kind of difficulty with science, we know that these sort of eyewitness accounts can be problematic too, right?
Yeah.
This guy was double the legal limit drinking. It's dark outside, etc. So that can be problematic. But nonetheless, you have this guy seeming to identify Barros as the shooter. So that's who gets prosecuted in this case. And then the prosecution has this DNA problem, right? The guy they're going after has been excluded in the DNA testing. And then that's kind of what I get into in the bulk of the piece. Like, how do they get around this problem, and what does it show us about the criminal justice system?
You listen to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're talking with the Globe's David Scharfenberg about how DNA evidence works and how it's used in criminal trials. So let's get into that. How does DNA evidence, at least in this case, one of the things you do in the piece is you sort of break down the basics of the science a bit. Can you do that for us now?
Sure thing. Yeah. So the real basics here, the kind of DNA analysis 101, if you will. The lab will get some genetic material, maybe it's a drop of blood or some saliva, and they will extract the DNA. And then they will look for these genetic markers that are called alleles. Okay? Alleles,
right.
Exactly. And they'll look for them at different kind of addresses, if you will, along the DNA. They call them loci. Different kind of locations, addresses, right? And we each get, one allele from our dad, one from our mom at each of these loci, and they form kind of a genetic signature, right? And so if you take a suspect's DNA, and in this case, the DNA they found in the gun, you try to kind of compare the two, right? If you match at every single loci, that's a pretty damn good chance that your DNA is on the gun.
Right.
But what happens when you have this big kind of jumble of alleles, right? Because often this equipment is so sensitive, it'll pick up, if one person touched a gun, a week ago, another person touched it there.
Somebody sneezed on it.
Yeah. I shook your hand and you touched the gun. Now my DNA is later, right? So you'll often get this kind of complex mixture on there, right? So they're looking at this mixture, and when you have a big jumble like that, you can have kind of chance matches. And we use a kind of an alphabet soup analogy in the story where, if a guy named Dan Brown puts a couple of letter-shaped pasta in the soup, DB for his initials, and his friend Annie Smith puts hers in, AS Annie Smith. Well, you can dip a spoon in there and pull out a D and an S. And that doesn't mean that someone named David Stewart, put their own initials into the soup. It's just a chance match, right?
Right. Yeah. So you went with David Stewart, not David Scharfenberg.
Yeah, I could have. I thought about it, but then I thought, that might get a little confusing. So anyhow, so you have all these. You can have these kind of chance matches, right? And that's what the prosecution leaned on here. They said, well, look at this chance match, and look at that match, and look at that match. They didn't call it a chance match. They just called it a match, right?
Yeah.
And they're going through them all. And for a jury that doesn't know better, it's like, well, it seems like this Terrell Barros guy, matches the DNA in a lot of places, maybe not all of them, but this looks kind of suspicious. Actually, it doesn't mean anything, but it looks suspicious to people who don't know better, and that's really what the prosecution exploited in this case.
And is there, in your estimation, is there an issue with the exploitation of this by the prosecution in this way, or is it just kind of, this is happening in cases all over the place?
I mean, it's a problem, and I think it's a widespread problem, which is why I'm writing about it in this series. It's fundamentally dishonest if you're, this guy, Terrell Barros, was excluded in the DNA testing. This was not a problem with the test itself. This is not junk science, right? They didn't make something up.
Yeah.
He was excluded. The problem is how it's presented to a jury, and in this case, how it's kind of twisted. And that's a real problem. This guy went to prison for a decade as a result.
How much did you know about DNA testing before you got into writing this story? Is this something you sort of, how did you get on this?
I spoke with a lawyer who actually in an unrelated case and kind of got me interested in this broader subject of how these, kind of legitimate science can get twisted. And I ended up talking to this person and talking to that person and eventually landed on this case. And I did not know a ton about DNA testing before I jumped into this, but I spent a lot of time on the phone and on Zoom with DNA scientists and talking to lawyers and kind of getting my head around it. And I think I knew no more than your average juror did, right? And so that's why I think it's easy for this stuff to get communicated in ways that a jury is confused by.
This is a case that happened in 2013.
Shooting was 2012 and the trial was 2013.
So we're more than a decade on from that. Has much changed in terms of the science, in terms of the way science is presented in these cases, in terms of juries or judges' understanding of it? Or is this still a really good example of what's happening today?
Yeah, so the DNA technology itself has evolved. It always does. We now have this software that's quite good at kind of looking at these complex DNA mixtures I was talking about and kind of separating them out. But remember, in this original case, there was no problem with the DNA testing itself.
Right.
It was an earlier
science.
version, but the testing was quite clear. It was how it was presented. And so that's still an issue. Even as the technology evolves in DNA or in other forensic science, there's still this question of how is it discussed in a lab report, or how is it discussed before a jury? Does the defense attorney understand the science, and can they mount a good cross-examination? These problems are still very much alive no matter how the technology is shifting.
Yeah, I think you cite a paper from 2023 from the National Institutes of Justice, authored by John Morgan, who uses this term system error, that it's not a science error, it's like a system error. It's in how we're using this science.
Exactly. He looked at over 700 wrongful convictions, and he found in some cases there was, junk science, these kind of things, but the bigger problem was what he called system error, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's what we've been discussing here. It's the way that these results are used and communicated. It's not the science itself. It's how it's discussed in the courtroom, how it's discussed in the lab report, that kind of thing.
You listen to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're talking with the Globe's David Scharfenberg about how DNA evidence works, and in some cases it sounds like doesn't work very well in our courtrooms. What's the takeaway for a case like this one, this Barros case? What is it a lesson for, again, judges, people who might be serving on a jury? Like, what should we take away from understanding what happened here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a problem that needs addressing here, and in the final installment of our series, I'll give a little hint here to readers. We'll be kind of
stay tuned. Watch
stay
this
tuned.
space.
We'll be providing some suggested solutions here, but essentially, you need some sort of oversight. This is the kind of thing that's happening in a courthouse there and a courthouse there. You need to really think about this in a holistic way. And figure out ways to address this, from a lawyer's perspective. You need defense attorneys who are more prepared to handle this sort of thing. You need state oversight, et cetera. And we'll get into details on how to do that. But it is a big systemic problem in need of a systemic.
How do you feel like this differs from, any other sort of part of the trial process? I mean, I think about, on the one hand, you sort of take a step back and you say, well, the prosecution's job is to present, one side of the story, and the defense's job is to present another side of the story.
Right.
It sounds like what I'm hearing you say is there's something maybe different when it comes to science, in that somebody should be presenting the story as best as we understand it, kind of both sides or all sides of it. How is this not just on the prosecution and on the defense to know what they're talking about?
It's a good question. We have this adversarial system, and that's a hugely important part of it. So you do need defense attorneys who understand how to kind of present their own side here and push back on this. That's important. But yes, broadly, the courts are a pretty bad place to hash out science, right? I mean, they go on precedent, right? A judge 5 years ago allowed this evidence in. Well, a judge today is going to be like, that's precedent. I'm going to allow it in. What do I, how do I know different? These judges aren't scientific experts, right? So you need a process by which you can really examine this science. There is a way in which you can have these sort of pretrial hearings, and you can have scientific experts up there, and you can kind of, they can put holes in this stuff and say this shouldn't even go before a jury, right?
Yeah.
Like this is not something a jury is going to understand, and it's not proper science, and therefore it shouldn't go. So you need those sort of safeguards.
So you sort of mentioned that, as you get to the end of this Twisted Science series, there's going to be some solutions posited or some potential ideas put into the world. But between here and there, what can we expect from the Twisted Science series?
So at the end of this first piece, I kind of hint where I'm going with the second, which is, we looked at what can happen in a courtroom, right? How a lawyer can ask questions that kind of leave the jury with an impression that they shouldn't have. What happens before it lands in a courtroom? And here I'll be kind of looking more at, what happens in the lab, right? Is there a way in which this legitimate science can be twisted there? And then, going forward, we'll look at some of the more kind of, we talked earlier about these technological advances, right? I mean, what does it look like with this kind of higher-end forensic science? Can even that be twisted? And I think you can probably guess where I'm headed with that one.
I bet it can. Is it all focused on DNA, or are we looking at other kinds of forensic science?
No, we'll be looking at other kinds of forensic science as well, not just DNA.
That was David Scharfenberg, Boston Globe reporter and deputy editor of the Globe's Ideas section. By the way, that Barrows conviction, it did eventually get overturned, though not before he spent 11 years behind bars. Part of the judge's reasoning, you guessed it, had to do with how the DNA evidence was presented in that initial trial. You can check out the first installment of the Globe's Twisted Science series now. In the meantime, perhaps not the most artful of transitions, but we're going to go for it anyway. John, hit it. Yes, we have baseball on our minds here at the Curiosity Desk as the season got started in earnest this past weekend and the Sox home opener coming up on Friday. And if you or a loved one are among the countless fans who bring a glove to the ballpark in the hopes of snagging a foul ball, have we got a story for you from the Curiosity Desk archives. For better or worse, baseball holds fast to its traditions, as if the rules of America's pastime were handed down to Abner Doubleday on Mount Cooperstown by God himself. But all traditions, no matter how long they have endured, began somewhere. Indeed, a batter was once ruled out if the ball was caught after one bounce. It used to take 8 called balls to earn a walk, and balls fouled off into the crowd were once dutifully returned.
The ball was really a sacred object. The umpires would keep the ball in play until it was literally falling to pieces. So the idea that a fan would keep it was just kind of ludicrous.
That's author and baseball historian Peter Morris. Now, as the 20th century dawned and baseball crowds swelled, fans became increasingly unwilling to part with rogue game balls. Teams responded by hiring ushers and security guards to retrieve them. There was the occasional incident, especially after 1920, when a Major League Baseball rules change mandated that fresh balls be used throughout the course of each game.
When you're rolling the ball out of play after a couple of at-bats, but then you're telling fans they can't keep them, that doesn't seem fair.
Especially to an 11-year-old kid.
Robert Cotter was my grandfather.
That's Holden resident Patrick Cotter. Now, you might not know his grandfather's name, but you should. As a kid in Philadelphia, Robert Tuffy Reds Cotter made a habit of spending summer afternoons taking in Phillies games, never mind that he didn't have any tickets.
He would sneak in by climbing up a drain pipe, then climbing under a gate while the guards were looking elsewhere.
On July 18th, 1922, the 11-year-old Cotter snagged a foul ball and refused to give it up to security, who brought him up to the team's business manager. When Cotter continued to hold his ground, ownership saw a chance to establish a legal precedent, once and for all, that game balls, even foul balls, were team property.
So he took him down to the precinct and insisted that he be arrested for larceny.
By the time Cotter's mother arrived, the courthouse had closed, and young Robert Cotter spent the night in jail. At his arraignment the next morning, Judge Charles Lincoln Brown ruled in favor of Cotter and lambasted Phillies ownership.
Such an act on the part of a boy is merely proof that he is following his most natural impulses.
He added,
"It is a thing I would do myself."
The incident turned into a full-blown PR nightmare, thanks in part to Tuffy Red's family.
His mother, Ann Cotter, she contacted newspapers. She pushed this story, so it wasn't just Tuffy Reds that was tough. It was Nana.
Big city papers, including the Boston Globe, picked up the story, and Morris says it didn't take long for club owners across the league to begin adopting a new policy when it came to fans and foul balls.
It was worth the expense. Baseball was sort of realizing that if you make someone a fan as a kid, then you get a lifelong fan. And there's no better way than a special souvenir that kind of captures the essence of the game.
As for Robert Tuffy Reds Cotter, the Phillies made amends in 1998, honoring him at a game as their fan of the century. And while Patrick Cotter would love to see his now late grandfather someday enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame, he'll settle for more folks simply knowing the story
of an 11-year-old kid who endured a night in jail to help establish a beloved baseball tradition.
You can go tell your son or daughter when they bring their glove to the game, thank Tuffy Reds. Oh, and by the way, apparently my grandfather made a good catch.
On the show, we'll be taking on some recent listener questions. If you've got a curiosity question you'd like us to investigate, we want to hear from you. There are two main ways you can get through to us. First, you can leave us a voicemail at 877-301-8970 or head to the Curiosity Desk landing page at gbh.org and submit your question in writing. We love to be able to answer them right here on the show. Speaking of the show, don't go anywhere. Just ahead, we will get acquainted with America's second First Lady, Weymouth's own Abigail Adams. This is the Curiosity Desk. Don't go away.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, retired FBI Agent Geoffrey Kelley. He spent 22 years chasing leads, following informants, and digging into Boston's criminal underworld, all to solve a case that remains unsolved, the Gardner Museum heist. In his new book, 13 Perfect Fugitives, he looks back on leading that investigation, the missing art at its center, the close calls, and the toll of spending decades inside one of Boston's most famous mysteries. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. 249 years and 364 days ago, a 31-year-old mother of five began a letter to her husband from her home in Braintree. In it, she lightly pox outbreak in the area. She also formulated a passage that would be among the most enduring of that heady era of American history when she urged him to, quote, remember the ladies, as he and his colleagues in Philadelphia were contemplating declaring independence and creating a whole new system of governance. The letter, of course, was written by Abigail Adams. Would that we could ask her what was going through her mind as she wrote those words. Well, today, we actually kind of can. Joining us now by Zoom is librarian and living history interpreter Sarah Walsh. If you're not watching us on the YouTube stream, I urge you to do so now because Sarah is in her full Abigail Adams regalia. So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say welcome Sarah or welcome Abigail, but either way, welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you so much. It is such a thrill to be joining you.
So let's talk a little bit about the Remember the Ladies letter briefly, just because tomorrow is the 250th anniversary of this letter being penned. Why is this letter so important, and why are Abigail's letters so important to American history?
The letter itself, I think, is so famous because it sounds like a feminist manifesto, right? It sounds like this call, this exhortation for representation, for a part in determining the laws of a fledgling country. And that's very appealing to people. They want to be able to say, feminism started long before the 60s, right? So it's very appealing. It's very beautiful to see this sentiment expressed at the time when the country was being founded, when the United States was being founded. But it's a private letter. It's a private letter from a wife to a husband, and he is a representative of the Continental Congress, but she's not the one standing up to say it. She's not the one wanting to barge in there, storm the doors, and declare that women deserve a voice. She's asking him, she's saying, I really want this new country of ours to be a place where women have an equal say, but not necessarily an equal role in determining those laws. She believed that the woman's place was very much in the domestic sphere and very much in educating those children to become effective and useful members of society. But it wasn't, I don't think it was the, statement that it has sort of become in popular sentiments.
Got you. So on Wednesday, you're going to be at Buttonwoods to do a talk on 18th century clothing. If folks are watching on the YouTube stream, or if you're not, go ahead to the YouTube stream now and watch. It appears you are in full what looks like 18th century clothing. This is one of your specialties and one of the ways you've come to Abigail Adams. What is it that we could better understand about Abigail Adams or about the times by focusing on clothes?
Everyone needed clothing, from enslaved individuals to working individuals in trade to the highest echelons of society. Everyone needed clothing, and everyone was involved in some way in the manufacture of clothing, in the fitting of clothing, in the wearing of clothing. So the making of clothing was a skilled trade. It was either tailors or mantua makers who would be fitting the clothes, making the clothes, but it was also at home. Wives and mothers and daughters and grandmothers and aunts might be working on the undergarments, the stays, or I'm sorry, not stays. Stays were a tailor's trade. Shifts, shirts, anything that was directly worn close to the skin. And understanding the process of making garments gives us some insight into how people moved about and how they carried themselves, you could say, because the stays, and I'm wearing my stays right now, they give you excellent posture. And even men started wearing stays because they gave you that sort of, carriage for yourself.
They were like, your posture is great. How are you doing it? Oh, it's the stays.
Exactly.
I'll try some myself. I think I could use
recommend
some stays.
it. And the heeled shoes and wearing the hair high, all of these things. And I did, in fact, make this gown entirely by hand, stitching every single piece and hemming it and putting it together. It took a very long time.
I was going to say, how long did it take? Yeah, that's amazing. But, when we talk about Abigail Adams, obviously she is not, your common, average, everyday American person in 1776, right? She is a person of import. I mean, as we point out, like her husband is, he becomes the second president of the United States. So what does her clothing in particular tell us about the time?
So her clothing would have been, a cotton gown like this maybe would have been for best. Actually, the printed cottons were as expensive as silks, depending on where you were getting them from. A wool gown, hand-loomed, hand-woven wool became the norm in order to not be paying taxes that the British Parliament was enacting on imported goods. So a plain homespun gown actually would have been more common, depending on where you are in the which taxes are we, protesting against right now. So this would have been for best. This would have been a gown that she might wear if she's meeting one of John's colleagues who's coming through Braintree, or if George Washington came and was coming through town and he stopped in for a visit, she would put on a cotton gown. But a wool gown is a work-a-day. It's, that's your go-to for, it's easy to clean, it's easy to take care of, it's easy to wear, and all of the clothes fasten with pins rather than with buttons or zippers or anything else, because it's adjustable. You can wear it depending on whether you are recovering from pregnancy or in the middle of a pregnancy or just had a little extra to eat that day. So the gowns, so the clothing is all very much a part of your life, and it's a part of how you present yourself and how you would want to be seen. I mean, Benjamin Franklin was in England as a diplomat dressed in American homespun because he wanted to be seen as a man of the people and not this fancy world traveler. And even in 1776, John was on the point of being hung for treason. He was not yet the, statesman, the diplomat, the president, the vice president, any of that. And he was not making a lot of money. And Abigail was really keeping the family together and keeping the family finances afloat by doing all of this sort of buying and selling and trading under the table and getting John to send her things from Europe, from Philadelphia, other places that weren't being family solvent for those years.
Making it work, as Tim Gunn would say. You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're talking with Abigail Adams, a.k.a. librarian and living history interpreter Sarah Walsh. How did you get it? Like, how did you get so deep into this that you are now today sitting with me talking in full Abigail Adams homespun made yourself clothing? What happened?
So I was a big fan of the musical 1776 when my husband actually introduced me to it. And in 2015, I co-produced and performed in a production in Seattle that was an entire cast of women and non-binary actors. And I played Abigail. And that was sort of the opportunity to kind of get into her head a little bit. But it's a show. It has a script. It has songs and moments that someone has written for you. But the next year, I went to a reenactment event that was in like northern Washington state, and I met a bunch of 18th century reenactors, and I was invited to do reenacting as Abigail Adams. And it's a big leap from having everything sort of written down for you to being able to ad lib and think about, as you said, how Abigail might have been cogitating over all of these things and what her thought process was. So I did a lot of research. I've been studying the letters. I've read a ton of books about her and her milieu. Her letters to John are some of the best preserved correspondence that we have from the 18th century. And there's also, in the times when she and John were together, there are her letters to her sisters as well. So that kind of helps to fill in the gaps of when she wouldn't have been writing to John, but she had other people that she wanted to keep on top of what was going on in her life.
How deep into this are you? Which is to say, like, do you dream as Abigail Adams? Like, do you have trouble breaking character?
I mean, I do actually love the embodiment of the time. I mean, again, like wearing the stays, having my hair arranged, even speaking as her, which I've been working with a wonderful, wonderful dialect. He calls himself a dialect architect, Christopher Davis.
Yes.
He studies these, elocution books and dictionaries and rhetoric guides and everything for how people in the 18th century in New England would have sounded, and working with him to be able to sound like Abigail as best as we can.
Can you give us a little? Can you give us a little of your Abigail?
Sure. Let me see. I long to hear that you have declared an independency. And by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're talking with Abigail Adams, if you couldn't tell. That's actually librarian and living history interpreter Sarah Walsh, reading from the Remember the Ladies letter for us right now. What have you learned about her? Sort of, I mean, do you feel like you have personally come to know her in a way? It seems like you would have to be able to do what you do to a certain extent. And so, what has that building of that relationship been like, for lack of a better way of saying it?
It's been really incredible. I mean, again, being able to sound like her. I cried the first time I read a letter in what is a good, I think, representation of her voice. I think that being able to understand not just the sound bites, right? Because there's a lot that's sort of behind the scenes of her life that there were some things that she wanted kept private. She said to John, burn this letter. And obviously he didn't.
Clearly not. We have it.
So there's a lot that I think I don't think she would have wanted to be known for that line. I think that she had a whole life that is beyond that, is behind that, is, the fact that she raised 4 children. She lost 2 children before the age of 2. She lost her mother. She lost her father. There was all of these things in her life that kind of propelled her forward. And we're more than that. We're more than just remembering the ladies. It was about keeping the farm going, even when, soldiers were being signed up from farm laborers, that there's all of these things that she had to do to make these decisions completely by herself, because you couldn't necessarily get a letter in time with an answer to a question about managing the household to be able to then make that decision. She had to do a lot of this on her own. So I think her stalwart kind of dependence on her own strength and her own knowledge and her own ability to do these things is what I think is more important to remember her for than just 3 lines in a letter.
We mentioned this Wednesday, April 1st, you're doing a talk at Buttonwoods Museum in Haverhill. Now, the proceeds from that event are going to support another event called Stitching History Together, which is coming this summer. What is that event in the summer that the proceeds from this are going to be supporting?
Yeah, so Buttonwoods has a gown in their collection that family lore states was owned by Abigail Adams. It's a gown that's gone through a couple of different, alterations and versions of it, but the fabric, the gown, all of that, it's getting very fragile. And we're going to be, myself and another 3 or 4 sewists are going to be getting together and doing a live dressmaking demonstration to recreate the gown. So it's going to be a whole week of live demonstration discussing the process of dressmaking, discussing how a gown is fitted, how a gown is cut out, how it's put together. And there's going to be an exhibit about the unknown, unnamed, and sometimes unfree labor that went into the textile and gown making, dressmaking industry. So the people who wove the silk, the people who shipped the silk from one place to another, the people who made a dress, the people who altered a dress, all of that is going to be emphasized. We have this gown that is, again, connected to sort of a famous name, but there's so much under the surface about how a gown like that comes into being. And that's going to be July of this summer. And you can support the project by going to the buttonwoods.org website and clicking the donate button to support that project coming into being.
You talk about how, I think a lot about, especially in America 250 moment, around artifacts, things from the time.
Yeah.
And as you talk about, you go through this process of making things the way they would have. What does that teach us, to sort of be in the physical presence of a thing or to experience the making of a thing? Why that?
I think that kind of disconnected from the things we purchase, the things we wear, the things we have, in a way that in the 18th century, you were intimately involved with making, purchasing, wearing things that you grew out of, you would remake, you would repurpose, you would restyle things that, the fabric was so expensive that it had value beyond its current iteration as a gown or a jacket or even a man's coat or breeches or whatever it was. You would preserve the fabric as long as you possibly could until it was literally falling apart. And we have such a culture of convenience and obsolescence and being able to say, not just I made this, but I can fix this. I can remake this. I can reuse this in such a way that it is still useful and still wearable or still displayable or whatever it is, right? Being able to hold on to something that isn't just going to have one use. It's not going to just have one user. It's not going to just have one wearer. That has actually changed my mindset about what else I'm purchasing and using and throwing away.
Empowerment. That is Abigail Adams, a.k.a. librarian and living history interpreter Sarah Walsh. You can see her for yourself this Wednesday, April 1st, 6:30 at Buttonwoods Museum in Haverhill. Proceeds, as we said, support Stitching History Together this summer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Stay with us. Just ahead, one dog, a 12-foot sinkhole, 36 emergency workers, and some pepperoni. We'll meet the man whose dog was rescued, making international headlines. This is the Curiosity Desk on GBH. Don't go anywhere.
Nearly all bicycles sold in America are built overseas, but an Indiana company wants to put the brakes on that with a bike factory here in the U.S.
They could make a difference with their idea of bringing manufacturing back. This is an area that knows manufacturing.
Could high tariffs on foreign competitors give a helpful push? That story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Mass General Brigham. In heart surgery, expertise matters. Mass General Brigham Heart and Vascular Institute performs thousands of surgeries each year and is committed to research and innovation. massgeneralbrigham.org/heart. And Riverstone International US LLC, located in Beverly, Massachusetts. A Riverstone International company acquiring legacy insurance globally since 2010. Learn more at rsml.co.uk.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. An 11-year-old lab made headlines last week when she was safely rescued by emergency crews after falling into a sinkhole in her owner's backyard. It was a moment out of a TV episode. Dozens of first responders working together to rescue the dog, Tessie, who was trapped 12 feet underground. And that got us wondering, what's it like to be the center of a feel-good news story like that? Well, to talk about that experience, we are now joined by Tessie's owner, David Velesig. Hello, David. Welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. Yeah, we're great. How are you on the heels of all this? Actually, let's start with the beginning. What happened?
Well, I came home from work, and it was any other day. I let the dogs out. I fed them, let them out, took a shower. I was about to go to my son's baseball scrimmage in Plymouth. He plays high school baseball. And so I'm ready to go. It's about 2:30. I call the dogs in. Taco comes in.
So you have two dogs, Taco and Tessie.
Taco and Tessie.
Go on.
So Taco comes running in, and Tessie's sort of not out there. Not unusual. She's older, so I go and look for her, and I don't find her. I come back inside. I look around. She's not inside, so I have Taco come out with me, and he's kind of a little antsy. And so I go out, and I'm sort of looking in the back, and I was a little worried because she's 11, and I'm thinking, is she sick? Is something going on? And you always think the worst. And I didn't think sinkhole.
No, I mean...
but so Taco comes out as well, and I'm sort of in the wrong area, and he's kind of over by the fence line, and he's kind of, shaking around a little bit and barking. So I go over there. I don't see anything. But I get a little closer, and there's a hole, maybe the top of it's like maybe the size of a pizza with leaves around it. It's not that big. And I'm like, what is this? So I look down, and 12 feet down or so, it kind of opens up a little bit, and I can see Tessie, and she's barking a little bit, and she looks scared, and it really didn't look very stable. So, time slows down a little bit. I quickly bring Taco in because I don't want two dogs in a hole.
Totally.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, Taco at this point is hero number one because that is a real, like, what's that girl? What's that lassie? Timmy's in a well.
Right.
She alerted you, or he alerted you. He alerted you. So good job. First hero, Taco. And then, so you determine this is unstable. And this is something that all of the news reports have pointed out. You did, quote unquote, the right thing by not trying to go down there yourself. You called 911.
I did. And sort of selfishly, I really wanted to get to my son's scrimmage.
That's okay. We love our children too. We love our pets, but we also love our children.
And so I'm looking around, and I do have a ladder, and I have ropes and stuff, and I'm thinking for a moment, like, maybe I could get down and get her, but it was too precarious, so it just wasn't going to go well. So I call 911, and a couple firefighters come, and it's funny. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't super stable.
Yeah.
But I could tell by these guys, by their demeanor, right? They knew it was fine for the moment, but it could go bad. So they brought in more people, the special unit from Barnstable. By this point, there's 24 people.
And what's going through your mind as more people keep rolling up and they're setting up sort of scaffolding and, like, you know, securing the location and everything?
Well, you want to help, but you also want to stay out of the way.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I had volunteered a couple times. I'm like, if with people here, I'll go down. And they're like, nobody's going down. And then I wasn't alone, though, because some of the other younger firefighters who were there for support, I could hear them kind of whispering, like, I'll do it. But the people in charge are very clear. They're like, we're not putting anyone down here unless we have to. So, and they didn't have to, fortunately.
So, you're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH. We're talking with Falmouth resident fisherman David Velesig about a dog, Tessie. His dog, Tessie, was rescued from a 12-foot sinkhole that opened up in his backyard. How ultimately did they get Tessie out?
So they backed a ladder truck into the driveway. They extended the ladder directly over the hole. They had at least a couple of ropes system going down, and they had this, like, canvas, almost
like a harness, like a bag kind of thing?
Almost like a bag, sort of, but and a pole, like a 15-foot pole, and they laid out this plywood around the hole so it wouldn't collapse, and there's guys, like, leaning down in, and I guess they had to get her onto this, like, gurney type of situation, this harness, and so then they could hoist her up, and even that, I think they didn't want to hurt her.
Yeah.
But they also didn't want the thing to collapse on her.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like they were sort of weighing it out. And ultimately, they needed her to move on to this. And I had given them some cheese and treats and stuff. It wasn't working. And one of the guys came up and was like, do you have anything more enticing? So I went in, and my son had cooked chicken, and there was some pepperoni. So I grabbed that, and ultimately, I guess it was the pepperoni.
It was pepperoni that did it.
The pepperoni.
So the big question on everybody's mind, we're getting flooded with questions about this.
Yeah.
They want to know, where is Tessie right now, and is she okay?
Oh, she's home. She's fine.
Yeah.
She it took her a minute or two. She looked pretty scared. There's a beautiful picture my neighbor took, Charlie, my neighbor who loves these dogs, of the two firefighters who actually got her out immediately, and one of them, guy probably looks like he's 55 or so, and big smile on his face, and then a younger guy, big smile, and she's scared, but she's comforted, you know. And I guess that's kind of, you know, how I felt a little bit. Like, you know, you don't want to lose your dog. You certainly don't want anybody getting hurt on your property, and I don't know. I was very grateful. They knew what they were doing. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
You know.
So, this is one of those stories, as we say in the parlance of our times, kind of went viral, but also just on traditional outlets, it was on network news and websites, the BBC, it was on the BBC. Like, what was that experience like, watching your dog and yourself kind of become world famous? Boom, like that.
I don't watch much local news.
Yeah.
I'll watch CNN a little bit here and there. And when I used to watch it, it was always bad news. So I was like, I just kind of stopped. So I was sort of naive to the fact that, like, this is going to be a story. But the choppers were up there. But you think maybe that's, I don't know. And at one point I looked up and there was two, and they were close to each other. And I was thinking, that's going to be the story. These guys are going to hit each other and fall. But you know, the local news interviewed me. I still didn't really think it was going to be much. But then work. I'm on the water, and I got my Bluetooth in, and the phone keeps ringing. And it was the CBS Evening News. I thought it was just a local CBS.
Yeah.
But they wanted some pictures, and they wanted to, talk about it. And so I watched the local CBS News, and it was sort of the same thing, and kind of forgot about it. And then maybe a few minutes into the nightly news, all of a sudden there's my dogs. And I was like, oh my God, this is
We
bigger
did it.
than...
We made it.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I understand it because it is a feel-good story for sure.
And we need one right now, right?
Yeah, we do. But what I really appreciated was the fact that you had 36 people here on a Tuesday afternoon doing their jobs, and not a single one of them looked like they didn't want to be there. There was hierarchy, there was command, there were people in charge. What was really interesting and great was, a dozen people chimed in with ideas and stuff. And the people in charge, they wanted to hear the ideas. They weren't dismissive. They ultimately knew what they were going to do, but they considered the ideas of everybody who was there.
Just watching them work the problem.
Yeah. And so for a moment in time, there's all these people working towards one goal, which you don't see all the time.
That's awesome. Real quick, we got to ask, what came of the sinkhole? Is it still there?
So, no, it's not there. Dalby Excavation came right over with a truckload of dirt and filled it in. I haven't gotten a bill. I'm shocked,
nice.
And they were great. And Falmouth Lumber, they donated plywood for the firefighters to secure the hole. So the whole community came together, and it was great. And I don't know.
It's awesome. All right. We've been speaking with Falmouth resident and fisherman David Velesig about what it was like having his dog rescued from a sinkhole by emergency crews last week and how it felt becoming briefly an international celebrity. David, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I'm joined by another international celebrity, the one and only Jared Bowen.
I don't know if that's true. If I was in a sinkhole, I think a lot of people would just walk by, nothing to see here.
Nobody would throw you any pepperoni to get you out. But in the absence of that, which I don't really want to contemplate you in a sinkhole, let me contemplate you behind a microphone doing the culture show today. If that were to happen, what might I hear?
Well, I am very, very excited to talk about Geoffrey Kelley, who spent 22 years as the lead FBI investigator on the Gardner museum heist. He has just written a book. It's called 13 Perfect Fugitives. I've covered this story for a long time. I learned a lot, things I did not know. So we will cover a lot of ground in this interview.
Fantastic.
Eddie Palmieri, the Latin jazz great, is having a tribute concert at Berklee. They do those very well there. So we'll talk to the creators behind that, including people who knew him. And then our own Diego Lopez went to Pax East this weekend. So he'll report back on all the gaming trends, excitement that he learned while participating at the convention center.
Fantastic stuff. That is Jared Bowen and the Culture Show coming your way in just about 2 short minutes, so don't go anywhere. As for us, that about does it for us today. The Curiosity Desk is produced by Aidan Connolly, Rachel Armani, Olivia Corcio, Hannah Loss, and Nicole Garcia. Patty Daniels is our steady hand. Our engineer today is John the Claw Parker. Special thanks to David Goodman and Andrew Massawa for their audio engineering prowess. We will be right back here in 23 short hours on GBH 89.7 and streaming on YouTube. Until then, I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, providing coverage plans for individuals, families, employers, and retirees with benefits that help you live in your moment. More at massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org.
Roadshow heads to Castle Farms in charming northern Michigan in search of finds fit for a king. Guess the top find on a new episode of Antiques Roadshow. Tonight at 8 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, the man who led the FBI investigation into the Gardner Museum heist. Now retired, FBI Agent Geoffrey Kelley spent 22 years chasing leads, developing informants, and digging into Boston's criminal underworld, all to solve a case that remains unsolved. In his new book, 13 Perfect Fugitives, he reports who stole the paintings and how and where the artwork traveled after the theft, not to mention the close calls he experienced in nearly getting them back. Then at Berklee College of Music, the legacy of Latin jazz giant Eddie Palmieri takes center stage. The pianist and band leader who brought Afro-Caribbean rhythm to jazz and who reshaped Latin music in the United States is the focus of Mambo Mania. We'll get a preview of a tribute led by Eguie Castrillo and the Berklee All-Stars Big Band. And this past weekend, Boston belonged to the gamers. Pax East brought cosplay, tournaments, and a flood of fan energy to the city. GBH's Diego Lopez was there. He joins us for a recap of the mood, moments, and must-see highlights from one of gaming's biggest East Coast gatherings. That's all right now on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Jared Bowen, live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. You're listening to The Culture Show. On March 18th, 1990, in the dark of night, two men posing as Boston police officers talked their way into the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. 81 minutes later, they walked out with 13 works of art, including masterpieces by Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Degas, in what remains the world's largest art heist. The empty frames still hang on the museum's walls. FBI Agent Geoffrey Kelley was one of the original members of the Bureau's art crime team. Now retired, he spent 22 years spearheading the Gardner Museum investigation, chasing leads, developing informants, and piecing together who stole the art and how they moved it through the criminal underworld. Now he's telling that story in 13 Perfect Fugitives, his new book about the heist, the long investigation, and the suspects, informants, and organized crime ties that have kept the case alive for 36 years. Geoffrey Kelley, welcome to The Culture Show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Jared. It's good to be here.
Well, I am glad to have you one-on-one because I have covered this on the broadcast side for a long time. I went to many of your press conferences over the years. I read your whole book. I have lots of questions.
Let's get into it.
All right. Well, first I'll start with just the title. And you opened the book by talking about you're looking at these artworks as fugitives, as people who are on the lam and not as objects.
Yeah, so the case was assigned to me in 2002, and at that time the statute of limitation on the actual robbery had been expired for more than 7 years, and it seemed that everybody who was associated with this case was dead. And so I took kind of a novel approach into how I was going to investigate it, and rather than working it as a traditional property crime, I decided to work it as a fugitive investigation because I knew that. I was on the violent crime squad at the time for many years, and I understood how you catch fugitives, and you catch fugitives through publicity. And so I tried to do the same thing with my 13 fugitives. And the reason why I call them perfect fugitives is, and I made an allusion to it in the book about Whitey Bulger. Fugitives, their human counterparts, they get caught because of those mundane tasks that you have to do. Going to the registry to get a license or getting a toothache and going food shopping. My fugitives don't have any of those issues. They can just lie waiting somewhere, which really makes them the perfect fugitives.
Well, you right off the bat addressed a question I have always had. I attended that press conference where the FBI trotted out images of Whitey Bulger and his girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, and what they may have been up to, in other words, loving animals, etc. Almost immediately, it felt like they were captured. I have never understood why, with all the publicity about the Gardner heist, the amount of times those images of the paintings have been placed out there, there hasn't been somebody who stepped forward.
Well, there have been people who stepped forward over the years, but there hasn't been anybody that stepped forward with actual firsthand possession of it, and that's really the issue. And I guess it makes them such good fugitives, right? Because they've remained hidden. But over the years that I had this case, and as you mentioned, I had it for 22 years, there were a lot of people that had really credible, helpful information that they provided to me and to the FBI. And we followed that information down. And over the years, it was really like this worldwide scavenger hunt, tracking down a lot to Maine. It took us down to Connecticut and down to Philadelphia. But it seems like we're always just one step behind.
Yeah, because I should have finished that sentence. Why didn't they step forward with the information that led to the return, like we saw Bulger arrested and Captain Gregg arrested right after that? Well, let's go to what you know. And I think a lot of people who kind of dip in and out of the story maybe not know this part. You, with what certainty do you know who committed this crime?
Yeah, I mean, listen, 100% certainty, you're not going to get that unless somebody comes forward with the paintings and says that they were the ones that did it. But that's an impossibility because I believe that those individuals are dead. But we received a lot of information over the years. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it was all my investigation. The investigation that I picked up in 2002 was picking up where my predecessor left off. And by 1998, the FBI had some very credible information that the heist had been pulled off by a crew out of the Dorchester section of Boston. But unlike, when you talk about a heist of this magnitude, it's a Hollywood heist.
Yep.
And people want to have a solution that's just as epic. And at the end, it was really just a bunch of criminals from Dorchester who pulled this one off.
And how does that speak to how they did it? The 81 minutes and the epically random assortment of things they took, from a finial to Rembrandt's only known seascape and Vermeer's, the only one here in New England. So epic work and alongside work that doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yeah, and that was one of the hardest things for me as an investigator, was to kind of try and unravel this. And when you start to unravel it, it makes a lot more sense. If you look at art theft in Massachusetts, it's really a unique beast that you don't see anywhere else in the country. There's this interconnection between art thieves and your common criminals. And if you go back to 1972, Massachusetts had the country's first armed robbery of a museum when 4 pieces were stolen at gunpoint from the Worcester Art Museum, including Rembrandt's St. Bartholomew. And they ended up shooting a guard in the stomach during the robbery. And that robbery was pulled off by a guy named Al Munday. And when another Worcester mobster found out about what Al Munday had done, he simply kidnapped Al Munday and stuck a gun in his ribs and make him give up the paintings, which the Worcester mobster then used to get a break on a pending sentence. And then we saw it 3 years later with Miles Connor getting out of a jam by stealing a Rembrandt from the Museum of Fine Arts. So when you look at what was taken in the Gardner Museum robbery, we know from the motion sensors they made a beeline for the Dutch room. That's the room full of Rembrandts, right? And they took Rembrandt's only known seascape. They took A Lady and Gentleman Black by Rembrandt. They went to a great deal of trouble to take a very small etching by Rembrandt. And then there was a 4th piece, Govard Flink's Landscape with an Obelisk, that up until a few years before the heist had been misattributed to Rembrandt. So when you start looking at all this together, it really speaks to a robbery that was going to center around Rembrandt's.
Because they were going to use those pieces to get people out of jail as needed.
Exactly.
Richard Abath. Did I say his last name right?
I say Abath. But
Abath. So he's the security guard. If people remember this image, we're streaming, we'll put up the image. He was one of the 2 who were bound, and he's got the really curly hair, and he has been a center of this investigation practically from day one. Because again, there were 2 people who showed up at the Gardner Museum in the wee hours of the morning, posing as police officers. They were allowed into the museum, which, as you point out, was very much against protocol in these regards that knew the protocol. I've always wondered about him. After reading your book, it seems like you're pretty certain that he was definitely in on it in some capacity.
Yes, he was. And I don't want to conflate it that he was part of their crew or anything like that, but I'm confident that when our subjects showed up that night to ring the buzzer, they knew that Rick was going to be at the other end of that intercom and was going to buzz them in.
And what was his incentive to do that?
Well, he got a pound of marijuana dropped off on his doorstep shortly after the heist, which I don't know if that was going to be his reward. But he'd just given his notice a few days earlier, so he only had a couple of weeks left at the museum. And I mentioned a minute ago about the motion sensors that were throughout the museum. They were in the galleries and the hallways, and they spelled out for us exactly where our subjects went during the night of the robbery. And once they entered the museum proper, they went first to the Dutch room, and they took a little detour to the short gallery, which is where they took the Degas sketches and the top of the Napoleonic flagpole called a finial. But we know from those motion sensor printouts that they never went into the first floor Blue Room gallery. They never went into it. And yet one of the pieces, Chez Tortoni, was taken from that gallery. And the only one who went in that gallery that night was Rick Abbott, who 31 minutes before the robbery left his post at the watch desk and made this inexplicable trip to the gallery.
And yet I'm obliged to point out, and this is going to be the case for something else another individual will talk about in a moment, that right up until his death, he insisted he didn't do it. Right until his death. How do you reconcile that?
That's a great question. I mean, I spoke to Rick many times over the years in treating him for his assistance. And he was always a very, very friendly guy. You know, we had very affable, cordial conversations, but he was not going to give it up. He was not going to tell us. As much as he would say, yeah, I know this looks really bad. I know it looks suspicious, but I wasn't involved. And, you know, there's almost kind of an existential question about Rick's involvement when you're looking at this heist. These subjects knew what they were doing. I don't want to say that they were master thieves or anything like that, but they knew what they were doing. They were in that museum for 81 minutes. They had a comfort level that's unprecedented. As we just saw with this museum robbery that happened in Italy a few days ago, they were in there for 3 minutes. That's more like it. 81 minutes, they knew where the surveillance cameras were kept. They knew that there were no proximity sensors that would alert outside the museum. They knew everything about that museum. So wouldn't it stand to reason that they would have also researched what will happen if 2 police officers show up at the museum unannounced one night? And if they'd done their homework, there was a clear-cut policy, which was to get their names and badge numbers and call Boston police. So they were, if the robbery went down and the guard followed protocol, they would have been arrested. But they went through with it anyway.
I'm speaking with Geoffrey Kelley about his new book, 13 Perfect Fugitives, the true story of the mob, murder, and the world's largest art heist. So you've told us, people can read the book to get the exact names and pictures of people you believe to be involved. I think people don't all, so you've told us who was involved. I don't think people also realize that you know where they went, including this house in Maine.
Yeah. Yeah, so by 2009, I'd had the case for about 7 years, and I'd done a lot of investigation following on from my predecessors. And we had a lot of really good information that was pointing to this crew from Dorchester. But everybody was dead. And so we're kind of at a dead end with that. And then
Can I just pause for a second?
Of course.
And dead intentionally because of the case, it seems.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Yeah, phrase it. It was dead, not from natural causes. Three of the members of the crew were violently murdered in the year following the heist, and a fourth one died under some very suspicious circumstances. And I've always drawn parallels to this case with the Lufthansa heist from, I think it was 1975, when the Lucchese crime family robbed like $6 million from JFK Airport, and anybody who's seen Goodfellas is familiar with that. They killed 9 members of the crew because the FBI was too close to them. And I think something similar like that happened here in the Gardner case, that they had to tie up some loose ends. And it's also one of the reasons that I believe that this case really did kind of go stagnant, was because those homicides would tend to have a chilling effect on anyone who harbored any aspirations to come forward. So getting back to 2009, we had all this great information, but really didn't have an avenue we could pursue. And then I got a phone call from a woman up in Maine who told me in this very matter-of-fact tone, it was basically like a take it or leave it. She said, my uncle had 3 or 4 of the stolen pieces hidden in their house up in Maine. And when I asked her who her uncle was, she told me it was Bobby Guarente, who was a member of that Dorchester crew. And that sent us up to Maine, and sure enough, we found the hide in the house, just as she described it. And then we went on to speak with Guarente's widow, who confirmed that her husband did, in fact, have these paintings. She saw them with her own eyes, and she was present when he handed them off to this mobster in Connecticut.
How does that affect you when you get there and you realize you are piecing this story together? You're in the room where they were hidden away.
Yeah, it was, I mean, for somebody who'd been, at the time I'd had the case, like I said, 7 years, and it was really very exciting to see where I believe these paintings have been stored. They were stored in this hide over the stairway leading up to the second floor, and it's this old farmhouse, and anybody in Boston who's lives in one of these old houses with the old horsehair plaster and the lath. But here over the staircase, it was basically a large easel that had been made out of sheetrock to store large objects. Really, really fascinating, very exciting. And when we went down to Connecticut to interview our Connecticut mobster, I was so confident we were going to be coming back either with the paintings or with a really good lead.
Well, you're skipping ahead on me because I want to ask one more question. Before we go down to Connecticut, staying in Maine for a moment, not all the works were there, though.
No. And that's the thing. Listen, the book gives you everything that I know about the case and everything that I'm allowed to talk about the case. But there are some missing holes in this investigation, and I wish I could fill them in for you. There were 13 items that were taken, and over the years, I've spoken to people who've seen the finial, the storm, the Vermeer, but I've never spoken to anybody, whether it's credible or not, I've never spoken to anybody who said that they've seen The Lady and Gentleman in Black, which is one of the large Rembrandts, or Landscape with an Obelisk, the Govard Flink piece. It's very surprising to me that none of these pieces have surfaced, and I think it's quite possible that they went into hiding by somebody or some people who were killed in 1991.
And maybe still are tucked away in a wall or a floor or something.
Exactly. And that's really what happens with art theft. Stolen artwork is typically recovered either right after it occurs or it's going to be generational. And somebody's going to pass away, and a family's going to be going through the attic, they're going to be going through a safe deposit box, and they're going to come upon these works that had no business being in their dad's possession.
But that is not what happened in Connecticut. So we'll go to Connecticut now. And am I saying this name correctly? Robert Gentile.
That's exactly right, yeah.
So here you have, I'll let you tell the story, but you have a man who was deeply involved and theoretically could control the return of some of the works.
Yeah. I mean, of all the people in the world, I think it was unfortunate that we found somebody who was just so unwilling to assist law enforcement. As I mentioned, the first meeting that we had with Bobby Gentile was with his attorney. And we had an immunity letter from Brian Kelley, who was the federal prosecutor at the time, and Anthony Amore from the director of security at the Gardner Museum had the authority to give the reward. And he declined. He said he didn't know anything.
$10 million, maybe $5 million at the time.
It was $5 million at the time, but I mean, he said he'd never even heard of the Gardner. He'd never heard of it, and any accusations to the contrary were lies, all lies, and it took a while to finally get into his house, because there's more than one way to skin a cat, and even though he was being completely refusing to cooperate with us, he agreed to sell drugs to an FBI informant down in Connecticut, and we ended up getting into his house because of that, because he sold drugs out of his house.
And there you saw the evidence that he very much knew what the heist was.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, we had the evidence response team from the New Haven division with us, and the agents there who are so used to doing searches all the time, and for some of them they were like, we've never had such a productive search. They recovered 7 handguns, a loaded shotgun, which was hanging on a hook by the front door, and dynamite. We had to we had to evacuate the house for that one. And but as it relates to the Gardner Museum heist, it's really pretty fascinating. We recovered all this police gear, duty belts, FBI and police hats, badges, body armor, all these things, which are pretty interesting, in the context of the Gardner Museum heist. And then really the most important piece of evidence that we found was tucked in a drawer down in the basement. And it was the March 19th, 1990 edition of the Boston Herald with the headlines about the heist. This is the guy who's never heard of the Gardner Museum heist. And then bizarre, inside the newspaper was a handwritten list of the stolen items with their black market values.
So here is the most frustrating thing. You have him, and I remember the coverage unfolding at the time and thinking, it's coming back now because this is the guy. And then, of course, you take us into your interrogations with him, getting him into jail not once but twice. You talk about in the book, even his own attorney, he's now dead, even his own attorney thinks he did it. And yet, despite immunity, despite getting out of jail, despite $5 million, this guy won't sing.
Yeah. It was really frustrating. And, I think sometimes you have to put yourself in the shoes of your adversary to try and understand their motivation. And that was the case with Bobby Gentile. I think it's quite, I have no question in my mind that he had the paintings. We got that from multiple sources. As you said, even his own attorney. But by the time we started talking to him, it's possible that he had gotten rid of them. We know that he shopped them down in Philadelphia because he was a made member of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. And it's possible that he had unloaded them, that he was successful in getting rid of them and moving them down to Philly. And if that's the case, then you really have to say, well, what's in it for him to cooperate? Like, what he would have to, in his mind, he would have to finger his colleagues down in Philly, which he was not about to do.
So in the end, this became about integrity for his own business, being in the mob.
Yeah, it really is. And, it's funny. I had so many agents that I worked with at the time who would talk to me and they'd say, why isn't he going to talk? And I would say to them, well, if somebody offered you $10 million to betray the FBI, would you do it? And they say, of course not. And I say, well, why not? And he's like, well, I took an oath not to. And I'm like, exactly. So did he.
There's one loose end that I was, maybe you can't say, but he told you guys, or one of the informants told you guys, that some of the works may have gone to a New York art dealer.
Yeah. Yeah, we traced it as far as Philadelphia, and where it went from there, there's some lines of investigation, but I certainly don't want to talk about it because it is still a pending case. I had a tremendous amount of latitude and forbearance from the FBI, and I'm very grateful for allowing me to write this book because I think it's a book that needs to be written. But at the same time, it is still a pending case, and I wouldn't want to put anything in the book that might jeopardize future success.
We kind of talked about this at the beginning, but you do believe that the works will come back someday. Do you think it'll be in our lifetimes?
I hope so. I hope so. I used to, in the FBI, you have a file review every 90 days. And in your file review, you have to write down what you've done in the last 90 days on a particular case and then what you're going to do in the next 90 days. And so for 22 years, for the Gardner file, every time I would put what I'm going to do in the next 90 days is recover the artwork, and I was always very optimistic about it. I'd always hoped that it would be during my tenure on the case, but I'm confident that they will be recovered. It's just a question of when, and I certainly hope it's in our lifetimes.
The other thing that you made me aware of, this was both within the FBI and you made me understand about the public at large, that there are still a lot of people who don't know what happened or can't recognize the works, which is maybe why, unlike Whitey Bulger, where people can assign a face to all of this, this hasn't really come forward. And you talk about there was resistance, maybe not in your time, but within the FBI, of people saying, well, maybe in your time too, if we're tasked with investigating things like September 11th, why would we worry about art? Art can be easily dismissed. How much of that is a factor here? Just the general lack of awareness.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, I will concede that it is just property. It's It's a property crime that's valued at $1 billion, but it is just a property crime, and I understand that. But more to the point, it really is, it's a tangible representation of our heritage. It's who we are as a people. And to lose our past, to lose our great artworks, and to lose historic buildings, it takes away part of our history. And, not to get I'm one of the original members of the art crime team, and so we've studied this a lot. And you can't put too fine a point on it that, one of the key factors in genocide is to eradicate a culture's past, because the thought process is if you can do that, then it's easier to make them disappear when they lose their history. And so every little piece that's taken away from our past just kind of erodes a little bit, and it makes it easier and easier for us to forget who we are as a civilization.
Well, Geoff Kelley, the book is amazing. I devoured it. There's so many facts in there. We didn't even touch on all of them. Congratulations on the book. I think for a while I lost faith. I thought they're gone. They're not coming back. You turned that around. So I look forward to being at the Gardner press conference where I will have a front row seat.
I'll be sitting right next to you.
And I look forward to you sitting next to me. I'll see you there.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you. Geoffrey Kelley is a retired FBI agent. For 22 years, he investigated the Gardner Museum heist, which is the subject of his new book, 13 Perfect Fugitives, the true story of the mob, murder, and the world's largest art heist. Well, coming up, a celebration of legendary Latin jazz and salsa musician Eddie Palmieri. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
I'm Arun Roth. Today on GBH's All Things Considered, TSA agents are getting paid again. We'll have the latest on the situation at Logan. A troubling new report shows Massachusetts is falling behind in the fight against bullying. And states are rolling out their share of a $50 billion rural health fund. But in some places, that could mean hospital cuts. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Explo, from international law to studio art. Explo's summer program helps middle schoolers to find their spark. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. General enrollment deadline April 1st. And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
And Porter Square Books, hosting Life of Pi author Jan Martel for his new novel, Son of Nobody, a retelling of the Trojan War from the perspective of two commoners. April 3rd, info at portersquarebooks.com.
Stream, read, watch. However you engage with your world, the new GBH News app brings you trusted local news wherever you go. Download it today on the App Store and Google Play.
Was one of the true pioneers of Latin music. Born in New York City to Puerto Rican parents, Palmieri's signature sound blended American jazz sensibilities with improvisation, with Latin rhythm and instrumentation. In 1975, Palmieri was the inaugural recipient of the Grammy Award for Best Latin Recording. This Wednesday at the Berklee Performance Center, Palmieri's work will be celebrated by Eguie Castrillo and the Berklee All-Stars with Mambo Mania, a tribute to Eddie Palmieri. Joining us to talk about it are Eguie Castrillo, professor of percussion at Berklee, and Humberto Ramirez, a Grammy Award-winning trumpeter, bandleader, and former collaborator and friend of Palmieri's. Thank you both so much for joining us. I love how you were playing along just in our recorded bit there. This brings you back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, of course. Well, for people who need a little refresher, how do you begin to describe who Eddie Palmieri was and his legacy?
Well, Eddie Palmieri, for all of us, he was a turning point, actually. The amount of work that this gentleman did during his life was amazing. A lot of hits of salsa, standards of salsa, and style. He changed the style. It was amazing, Humberto.
Yeah, Maestro Eddie Palmieri was a genius. He was visionary, composer, band leader, piano player. I'd like to mention his inspiration was his older brother, Charlie Palmieri, he died early, but he was his inspiration and his teacher. And because of that, Eddie was able to develop an incredible career as a musician.
Well, what was it? Was it there something he specifically set out to do? Because if you step back and you look at all he did and all he brought together, there's a great storytelling there. There seems such great intention there. How would you say it came together?
If you take a look and have a listen to some of his music, you're gonna find out that he was doing music ahead of his time, and doing new sounds with Latin music. Remember, Eddie was born in New York from Puerto Rican parents from Ponce, and he was able to do a mix with the Latin rhythms, Afro-Cuban rhythms also, Puerto Rican rhythms, also with the jazz that was happening in New York City back in the 1960s and 70s.
And this is all going to come to the fore in this concert.
Yes. As a part of the Mambo Mania concerts, this time is 2026. This is a concert that I create for Berklee students. So I have the opportunity to bring big names like Humberto Ramirez, in the past Gilberto Santa Rosa, or Edmar Colón, Victor Mendoza, and the students have the opportunity to play with these amazing musicians and have that experience. So that's the main thing of this concert. But especially this year, the big band sounds unbelievable, very, very good, and we're gonna do that tribute to this amazing musician, Eddie Palmieri.
Well, I think we're also talking about this in a big way this year and last year because of Bad Bunny, and this renewed appreciation, this renewed understanding and focus on Latin music. How would you connect those threads from what he was doing decades and decades ago to what we're talking about right now, what we see on the Super Bowl right now?
That's right. I talked about this before. Since Bad Bunny and his famous residency in Puerto Rico, and I think most of the musical concept on his last album that just won Album of the Year at the Grammys is because he listened to that music, or his parents listened to salsa. Actually, I think that would happen because he mentioned in an interview in Puerto Rico a couple of months ago. So he wanted to make sure that he mixed his musical Puerto Rican roots with the music that he's doing, and it came out great. And I'm sure Eddie Palmieri was a part of that in some way.
Well, to go a little bit deeper, as we look at how he saw the Caribbean and really brought forth a sound that people hadn't necessarily heard before, what was he finding? What was he mining in that music and that sound that again, made it so singular?
You're talking about Bad Bunny?
No, Eddie Palmieri.
Eddie Palmieri, okay. The sound that Eddie basically create, because remember when Eddie Palmieri came out with his own band, it was called La Perfecta. What was happening in New York, which is the base town for him, was the big band Mambos, and all of a sudden this guy came with this only trombone sound, and a very small band and very, very hot, and change everything. So it's something that probably you can.
Well, yeah, because Humberto, you came up under this and then became a friend, and he was a mentor.
I consider him one of my mentors. We were able to make music together, and also we were part of in the 90s of the same record label, Tropic Jazz, in New York City, and Eddie said something that's very important, and Eddie, he played for the great Tito Rodriguez, a band leader, singer from Puerto Rico. He was a piano player in some of his records, and from there, he jumped to be a band leader and created the unique sound of La Perfecta, 2 trombones when they were coming from big band sound, the big band Latin sound, Eddie said, no, I'm going to try the trombones. And when you talk about salsa, sometimes people don't really recognize that he was the first that bring to salsa that's the sound of two trombones on his music. And also, that was an original concept and sound and style of music. But then, as an arranger and as a composer, he did the same thing. You listen to Eddie Palmieri's arrangements, and you say, that's Palmieri. Without no doubt. I mean, that's Palmieri. That's his sound.
Well, let's take a little listen. This is from his 1973 album, Sentido, and I think the English translation would be Adoration, and this is where we hear salsa. We'll talk about that and how he didn't necessarily like that term either, but let's listen to a little bit and we can hear there.
He played different kind of trumpets. You know, the regular trumpet, which is
flugelhorn. The trumpet and we trumpet players, we play flugelhorn. It's very similar. The technique is the same, but the sound it's more mellow, more dark, kind of a dark sound.
So in that piece, that part that you put, you can hear the flugelhorn behind the singer. I was telling him, look, check it out. That's a flugelhorn.
So what was it about salsa and what he did there? And I understand that salsa is not a word he very much approved of.
It's not a musical expression. It's not a musical genre. You know, it's a name, a commercial name for traditional variety of Cuban rhythms. And one important thing about salsa, what we call salsa, it's that because of those Cuban rhythms, musicians from Puerto Rico and groups from Puerto Rico like Cortijo y su combo, they were able to, they mix Puerto Rican rhythms like plena, bomba, jíbara, and then the New York diaspora, the musicians and singers that were born in New York from Puerto Rican parents, they were able to do a mix of Cuban rhythms, Puerto Rican rhythms, and the soul, the R&B, the jazz, the pop sound from New York.
So we're talking about Mambo Mania, a tribute to Eddie Palmieri, taking place this Wednesday at 8 at the Berklee Performance Center. I'm speaking with Eguie Castrillo, professor of percussion at Berklee College of Music, and Humberto Ramirez, a Grammy Award-winning trumpeter and band leader. Well, speaking of the Grammys, what did he do in this regard, too? That, again, you can extend all the way to Bad Bunny, and he reaped the awards with his new music.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
But you're talking about Eddie, right?
Eddie. And making sure that the Recording Academy, in other words, the Grammys, understood this music and were part of shepherding it forward.
You mentioned at the beginning of the interview that Eddie, he was the first winning for the first time. The Grammys have a category in Latin music. He won with the Son of Latin Music. But then I remember, and I was in New York then, and he called me, and he called a lot of people because the Grammy president, he was doing it was like a meeting with musicians from New York, Puerto Rico, because he wanted to establish more different categories of the Grammys for Latin music, because there was only one for many years, and Eddie was the one that was in front, that was the leader of that movement. And later, not only we got more categories on the Grammys, but also got the Latin Grammy that it's the Latin Grammys in November in Las Vegas, and that happened because Eddie was the one that pushed that to happen, make it happen.
Well, yeah, I can imagine this is a reason you're bringing in your students too, because I'm sure this activism resonates deeply with them as well. That this is a man who was performing, but also, he was scanning the room, as it were, and he was making sure that everybody was paying attention as they should have. And this is a great lesson for your students who are coming up right now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Whatever Humberto said is right. We have those categories thanks to Eddie Palmieri. I remember Tito Puente. Always said, in order to keep his mouth shut, they give him the category. But we own that to him.
I noticed that the New York Times in his obituary described him as one of the most, if not the most, fiery performer of the 20th century. What was it to see him on stage and the energy he brought?
Man, let me tell you something. Well, I have to say that Eddie Palmieri also was a percussionist. Mm-hmm. So that appears to me because I'm a percussionist. But he was a very, very good percussionist in Bolero, and he applied that to the piano. That force that guy have is like second to none. The power that band had is unbelievable. There is no way you can stay sitting down doing nothing. You have to stand up and dance and scream and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, Eddie was a very intense performer.
Yeah,
it was when he got the seat at the piano and the lights went up. He was unbelievable. He was very into it, very intense.
I have to say something before we forget. Humberto Ramirez, which is my guest for this occasion, he composed a tune specifically for this concert. So the debut of the tune is gonna be on Wednesday. So it's amazing tune.
Of course we can't play it because it is the debut, so it hasn't been recorded.
Yeah,
but what can you share
we had a
about
premiere on Wednesday? It's a very special composition for me because inspired on one of my mentors, and we're gonna do it for the first live at the show. But I wanted to mention also that February last year in Puerto Rico was going to be it meant to be the last concert for Eddie Palmieri, and he couldn't make the flight. But I was very excited and honored because his son called me and he asked me to be the musical director for that show.
Wow.
And it was an honor. And he said, my dad told me that to call you, and he said, I want Humberto Ramirez to be the musical director for that show in Puerto Rico because I won't be able to attend because the doctors, they won't allow me to fly. So that was, for me, that was an honor. And the words that he told me on the phone the day before the show was incredible. The support and his confidence in me to play all this music, Puerto Rico, Adoración, and Balao Chatambot, his great hits.
Yeah.
I want to give you the final word, and you talked about who he was on stage. How would you describe who he was off, especially in regard to the mentorship that he provided you and others?
Well, in my case, I don't have too much time with him like Humberto did, but I have to say that last time I played in Puerto Rico, I was playing it was called the Puerto Rico Jazz Festival, and he was one of my guests. He came and performed like 3 songs with me, and this icon that I grew up playing his music in my room, in my home, and now I have the guy next to me, and he treated me with so much respect that I was like, oh wow, hold it, it's supposed to be you, not me. But he was like, he made you feel very, very good and respect you a lot.
Yeah, Eddie, in my case, he supported my career so much, and I was able to be in the studio in many projects and live performances. So I'm very grateful because I was able to live in the time of Eddie Palmieri. And for me, he's a very special musician. 10 Grammy Awards, so many records, so many hits, and one of the few musicians that were successful in 2 different musical styles, salsa and Latin jazz.
Well, it makes it all the more poignant that you two are behind this effort, and his DNA will be all over that stage with your performance this week. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Eguie Castrillo is professor of percussion at Berklee College of Music. Humberto Ramirez is a Grammy Award-winning trumpeter and band leader. Mambo Mania, a tribute to Eddie Palmieri, takes place this Wednesday at 8 at the Berklee Performance Center. For tickets and more information, visit berklee.edu. Coming up over the weekend, Boston was transformed into a capital of gaming culture. GBH's Diego Lopez takes us inside PAX East. He's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
Scientists have installed an underwater microphone in an iconic bay in Greenland to study the effects of climate change.
Below the ice, there are bowhead whales, there are beluga whales, there are narwhals, there are different kinds of seals. So lots of life that we can't see, but we can hear thanks to the hydrophone.
That microphone streams on the internet, so you and I can listen too. We tune in next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Schneider Electric, bringing sustainability advisory services to the Boston Athletic Association and committed to helping advance energy tech worldwide. Proud sponsor of The Long Run, Wednesdays at 12:30 on GBH 89.7. And New England Recovery Center, providing inpatient addiction treatment in state-of-the-art facilities located in Westboro, Mass. Learn more at newenglandrecoverycenter.org or by calling 1-877-MY-REHAB. And the Lyric Stage, presenting Angry, Raucous, and Shamelessly Gorgeous by Pearl Clegg, a comedy with wit, heart, and soul. Now through April 12th at Lyric Stage Boston. Tickets at lyricstage.com.
GBH News is your home for trusted local news. Get it at 89.7 on the radio, gbhnews.org, and subscribe to the GBH News YouTube channel. GBH News, what matters to you.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. For one weekend, Boston becomes the center of the gaming world by way of PAX East, the East Coast's biggest gaming convention. Since arriving in Boston in 2010, it has grown into a sprawling showcase of gaming culture, where blockbuster studios, indie developers, and devoted fans converge in a convention center-sized garden of digital delights, full of cosplay, tournaments, and demos. GBH's Morning Edition producer Diego Lopez was on the scene. He joins us for a recap of this year's convention. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I ran by this weekend by the convention center in South Boston and saw all manner of people. Just to start off, talk about the excitement that people have in coming to this and what they're finding in PAX East.
Yeah, so this was an absolutely massive 4-day event. It began on Thursday, and in recent years, they've had around 100,000 people attend this over the course of the whole extra long weekend. And yeah, if you've ever been to the Seaports Convention Center, it's absolutely massive, and it was filled completely end to end with so many different things to do, so many different activities and panels. So of course you have all the games you can try and test out yourself. But in addition to that, you've got cosplay meetups with people dressed as their favorite video game characters. You've got gaming competitions and speedrunning competitions, panels to talk about game development or diversity in gaming. So really there's just a whole bunch of things you can do throughout all 4 days to kind of switch things up.
And you were there throughout the weekend?
Yeah, I was there for the first couple of days.
And what I can imagine that everybody wants to go to understand what is new in the gaming world, to be the first to see or even play it. How does that play out? What's introduced at PAX East?
So it kind of changes up every year. Different major companies will be there. Some years they'll skip, for example, Librarian, which created Baldur's Gate 3, which was one of the most popular games when it came out a couple years ago, skipped it this year, which was kind of a notable absence. And Square Enix as well, which produces the Final Fantasy games. But then this year you had other really big, tentpole ones like Nintendo come, and they were introducing a bunch of new games. Some of the biggest ones they had, because the Switch 2 recently dropped, was 2 new Pokemon games, Pokemon Pokopia and Pokemon Champions, which are 2 very different takes on the same franchise. One that's like a cozy life simulator, sort of similar to Animal Crossing, and then one that's like a fighting game. So that was probably the biggest company that I saw there. But of course, you also have a ton of indie developers as well. Hades 2, which is the sequel to a 2020 game that was widely regarded as the best of 2020, won many Game of the Year awards, was announced during the timing of the event, and they had, special stations there where you could play out and test the game. So that was really fun as well.
And are they, I always wonder when something like this happens, how the developers of the games or the companies are mindful of the interaction. Are they doing marketing research? Are they doing information gathering here? What are they doing as people are having some of the earliest encounters with their games?
I think most of this is really just a marketing thing. They're trying to get you excited about the games. They're trying to give you a little bit of hands-on experience where you can ask questions and sort of get a feel for things yourself. Many of these games have been tested already quite a bit. Many of them, some have already come out maybe a couple of days before. Some are just about to drop, and there's probably not a whole lot of time to fix things. And the truth, too, is that games are kind of always being adjusted nowadays. Even after they're launched, there's always like patches and stuff like that coming out. So really, it's just about getting people there, getting people excited, and, showing off what's new.
How significant is it that we have this in Boston? Yes, there are conventions like this in other parts of the country, but only a few parts of the country. Why did Boston become so significant?
It's difficult to say. I mean, it's a good space to hold it. We don't typically get as much of the big gaming things. There's not really as many big studios with as much of a big presence here. But there's a lot of people interested in it. There's a lot of people who game, and there's a lot of people who come through here, especially young people, this being, the mecca of college town, so to speak. So there's definitely the audience for it. And I think that that's kind of like a really important aspect of like what makes this so popular and so big.
What's the sense of community like? As I mentioned, I saw people on the T this weekend who were dressed in costumes. It's cosplay, of course. I saw people walking around, and they all have their lanyards for Pax East. Again, as I started off by saying, what's the sense of community that happens?
So there's really a lot. I mean, as you said, there's groups of friends who go. People make this a big socializing thing. People come from out of town. I, met people from all over the U.S. Some coming as from, the Midwest and whatnot, just to come here and be there and check it out. But also some of the booths and events at the actual convention itself encourage community building. So a really good example of this is they had this group that was called Danger Wizard. And for example, what they do is they run professional Dungeons and Dragons game nights, because, one of the things they talk about is how difficult it is to schedule this, getting 4 adults, to do anything on a weekly basis is, as they told me, that's the biggest dragon to slay. And so, they invite you to come check them out and, make friends and meet with them, and you can organize board games and find people to play with. They have local game shops there, like Night Moves in Brookline had a booth, and they were, encouraging people to come check them out in addition to selling games as well.
Well, I think everybody has this assumption that we're talking just about video games and online gaming, but is there a heavy game, board game, analog game tradition that people can find at Pax East?
Yeah, that's really definitely not something that's an afterthought. I'd say a good 50% of the event is split between video games and tabletop games. It's a very significant part of it. There's all kinds of merchandise and books and games you can buy. They had, formal competitions for things like Magic the Gathering, literally hundreds of gaming tables, spread out the entire length of the convention hall. And then they also had smaller, less famous tabletop or board games that you could test out. In many cases, the actual creators of the game were there showing off and explaining their games. For example, there was a popular award-winning board game there called Fire Tower, which I had never heard of, but I got to play a full match and learn the rules from the game's own designer, Sam Bryant. And I have a clip of him here talking about how Pax East helped that game grow in popularity.
So this is really where Fire Tower was born. Like years ago, we were in the little demo area in Unpub showing at one little table with tissue paper fire. So we've really been able to grow it over the years coming to the show.
One more thing I just want to say that I thought was really unique was I saw this one game there that was called Crime, No Crime. And in it, you draw cards and have to guess if the action described on the card is a crime in the U.S. Then you have to guess, like, what's the most severe thing you could be charged for, like, in court. So, for example...
And these are real crimes?
Yes, these are real crimes. This is meant to educate you about the law. So, for example, if you're a lookout for a robbery on a crime and someone, gets shot and killed during that robbery, what's the worst thing you could be charged with? And turns out the answer was you could, accessory to murder or something like that, something very severe, which you might not expect. I'll let one of the lead designers of the game, Eartha Johnson, explain the story behind it.
Yeah, we're family lawyers. My oldest daughter is a criminal district court judge. The middle is now a public defender. She was a prosecutor for over a decade. Then I have a son that does criminal defense. My husband and I did corporate law. So we get calls when people are in trouble, and that's what made us create the crane because, as I said, most people know they committed a crime, but very few realize the gravity. And we say when people know better, they do better.
So not only do you get to have fun, you get to learn something, and it turns out that I'm not as well versed in the law as I had hoped.
I'm not sure that I would do that well in that game either. We'll just leave it at that. I don't think we're always doing the crime equations. Hopefully we're having to do the crime equations. But are people like the woman you were just speaking with, they're coming to this too so they can get something like their game off the ground?
Exactly. There's, like I said, major publishers there like Wizards of the Coast, which frequently has D&D stuff. Didn't necessarily this year. Their focus was more on Magic the Gathering. But then, yes, like this particular Crime, No Crime game, the couple that was there promoting it came in from Houston. So lots of smaller game companies come to, promote it and get people to check it out.
Well, it's wonderful. It's fascinating. I think it's also in line with what we've talked about so often on the Culture Show is especially younger generations moving back to an analog world, whether it be cassette tapes or DVDs, just having something physical to interact with. And certainly what you just spent a lot of time talking about falls in that category. Diego Lopez, thank you so much for reporting on all you experienced at PAX East this weekend.
Thank you for having me.
Diego Lopez is a producer on GBH's Morning Edition. Again, thank you. And thank you for listening to another edition of The Culture Show. You can tune in tomorrow for former U.S. Poet Laureate Billy Collins on his latest collection of poetry, all centered on man's best friend. He talks about Dog Show, his new collection of poetry. And Ibram X. Kendi joins me about his latest book, which explores the racist conspiracy theories fueling global authoritarianism. The Culture Show crew is Max Chow-Gillette, Kate Dellis, and Chelsea Mers. Our engineer is Bill Piacciatelli. Patrick Lally produced our YouTube live stream. If you ever miss us here on the radio, you can keep up with all things arts and culture by way of the Culture Show podcast. Just go to Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I should also mention that Billy Collins will be speaking at the JFK Library tonight about his new Dog Show collection of poems. He'll be in conversation. There will be books there. I'll be moderating that conversation, and the event is free. That again happens tonight at the John F. Kennedy Library and Presidential Museum. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a great day.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
GBH's All Things Considered is coming up this afternoon at 4, with Marketplace at 6:30. But first, get a global view of the news with The World. Up next, here on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And H&H, the Handel and Haydn Society. Spring blossoms with Handel's water music and the first Brandenburg Concerto, led by Artistic Director Jonathan Cohen, April 10th and 12th at Symphony Hall. Tickets at handelandhaydn.org.
Henry David Thoreau helped define modern environmentalism and nonviolent resistance, yet his life had been obscured by myth. Unravel Henry David Thoreau in the new 3-part series from Ken Burns, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
If you're looking for a quick, clean, and sustainable way to get rid of your used vehicle, how about donating it to GBH? With our vehicle donation program, you can get to clearing out the clutter in that garage while also supporting your local NPR station. We work to accept